I can confirm your live streaming.
Thank you. Welcome to the June 13th Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee meeting. The City of Kitchener has aligned with provincial changes to COVID-19 restrictions, and City Hall is now open for personal services, but appointments are still being encouraged. The city remains committed to the safety of our patrons and staff and continues to facilitate electronic meeting participation for members of the public. Those people interested in participating in full meetings can register to participate electronically by completing the online delegation registration form at www.kitchener.ca/delegation or via email at delegation@kitchener.ca. For those who are interested in accessing the meeting live stream video, it is available at kitchener.ca/watchnow. So we have no consent items or discussion items, so we'll move directly into the public meeting. This is a formal public meeting to consider applications under the Planning Act. If a person or public body that would otherwise have an ability to appeal a decision of the City of Kitchener to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make some written submissions to the City of Kitchener before the bylaws pass, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. So the first item we have this afternoon is regarding a bylaw amendment of 1525 Bleams Road. And I see there is a delegation, but first we'll go to City Planner Tim Saylor, who will provide a 5-minute presentation on this matter. Welcome, Mr. Saylor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee. My name is Tim Saylor, and I'm a planner here at the City of Kitchener. I'm here to speak to the application for a modification to a draft approved plan of subdivision 30T 08206 and zoning bylaw amendment ZBA 22004 BTS for 1525 Bleams Road. Next slide, please. Here, I will briefly go over the site context. The lands are located to the south of Bleams Road near the intersection of Fisher-Hallman Road and Bleams. The lot is surrounded by low-rise residential uses to the north, east, west, and south. The lands in question were used for a temporary pumping station, which is no longer required due to servicing upgrades within the area. Next slide, please. This slide shows the modified draft plan of subdivision. The modification shows the addition of 8 blocks with the intended use for 6 of the blocks for single detached dwellings, 1 block for an end unit of a townhouse dwelling, and 1 block for a regional road widening along Bleams Road. The modification will also result in the construction of the undeveloped portion of Histan Trail, providing a through connection for the portion of Histan Trail located within the existing subdivision. Staff are of the opinion that the proposed street layout and lotting is appropriate for the development of the lands. Next slide, please. Here you can see the area in question. The current zoning on Area 1 is Agricultural Zone A1, and Area 2 is zoned Agricultural Zone A1 with Special Regulation 1R. The proposed zoning on the properties is Residential 6, R6, with special regulations that are all the same as the rest of the subdivision that has already been approved. Next slide, please. Staff are supportive of the zoning bylaw amendment and modification to draft approved plan of subdivision 30T 08206. The proposed design of the lots and built form for 6 new single detached dwellings and 1 street fronting townhouse unit was always contemplated with the original development application. The temporary pumping station that was located on site is no longer required as a result of infrastructure improvements, and the lands can be incorporated within the plan of subdivision and developed as intended. The subject applications are consistent with the policies of the provincial policy statement, conform to the growth plan of the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, and the City of Kitchener official plan, and represent good planning. That concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I'm available to answer them at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and I apologize for mispronouncing your last name, Mr. Seiler. Okay, so thank you for the presentation. I'll also point out that Mr. Garrett Stevenson, the Manager of Development is also in attendance and available to answer questions if they may arise. So I'd like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. You will be made a panelist prior to your name being called. Once you have joined the meeting as a panelist, you will have access to your microphone and camera. Please leave your video camera turned off and your microphone audio muted until you are called upon to speak. One last reminder for delegations, please do not use offensive language during your presentation against staff or council. Our first delegation is Ms. Kirsten Barrisdale from GSP Group, and there is no PowerPoint presentation.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of committee. I am here representing Madam E. Holmes with respect to the proposed zone change application and modification to draft approval that you're considering this afternoon. We've had a chance to review the staff report as well as the recommended zoning bylaw and conditions of draft approval, and we have no issues or concerns. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have with respect to the proposed development.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you for coming in and speaking to us. Can I get a mover for this item? Councillor Davey? Any comments? Councillor Gazzola? You have comments or questions?
No, I don't have a comment. I just have a question of staff.
Go ahead.
Was this land in? Did I hear that it was intended to be the site of a pumping station? Is that what I heard, or am I hearing things?
Through the chair, the lands was used previously as a temporary pumping station until the infrastructure has been improved for the area. Now that the infrastructure has been improved, the pumping station is no longer required, and these lands can be adjoined to the subdivision that already has currently been approved.
Was it expected that it was going to be used as a pumping station?
It was through the chair. It was used for temporary purposes until the new infrastructure could be completed. Now that the new infrastructure has been completed, the temporary pumping station is no longer required.
Okay, so that land would never have been given to the city. Is that correct?
Through the chair, the intent was always going to be for the addition to the subdivision.
All right, thank you.
I see Mr. Stevenson turned his camera on. Did you want to add something?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And before Mr. Seiler's time being involved in this file, I can add a little bit of context. These lands were originally owned by the subdivider and as part of the Southwest Kitchener redevelopment plans and were identified for a temporary pumping station. The pumping station was constructed and was operational. Now that upgrades have been completed on the South Strasbourg sanitary sewer and the Middle Strasbourg sanitary sewer, the pump house is redundant, no longer needed. And as part of the original arrangement, the lands were transferred back. The city is no longer an owner or an operator of these lands, and they are owned by Madam E.
Any
other questions, Councillor Gazzola, or comments?
You know, so is that the way it works when that happens? That if the land isn't used and it's required to go back to the developer? Is that the normal process?
Through you, Madam Chair, in this particular case, as part of the settlement agreements through, at the time, the OMB, the arrangements for temporary servicing for all of the lands in Southwest Kitchener was determined as part of a sequential staging through multiple plans of subdivisions. And as part of that credit for service servicing agreement that the developers in Southwest Kitchener had agreed to, this was constructed temporarily and is now no longer required. So this is somewhat of a unique scenario given the arrangements that were made previously as part of those agreements.
Right, thank you.
Okay, if there are no other comments, we'll just go over the motion itself. It reads that zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 2022/004 BTS for Mattamy South Estates Limited be approved in the form shown in the proposed bylaw and map number 1 attached to report DSD 2022-257 as Appendix A, and that the City of Kitchener, pursuant to Section 5144 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, Chapter P13 is amended, and Delegation Bylaw 2002-64 hereby modifies the conditions of draft approval for the plan of subdivision application 30T-08206 in the City of Kitchener for Mattamy Estates, South Estates Limited, as attached to report DSD 2022-256 as Appendix B. All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you. Okay, the next item is regarding a draft plan of condominium at 55 Franklin Street. Again, we have one delegation, but we'll begin with a 5-minute presentation from City Planner Tim Seiler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The second report I'm here today to speak is to application 30 CDM 22203, which proposes a vacant land plan of condominium at 55 Franklin Street South. Next slide, please. Here's an overview of the site for context. The lands are located between Franklin Street South and 8th Avenue in the Vanier neighborhood, in close proximity to Highway 8, that is to the north of the site. Low-rise residential uses are to the west, and high-rise residential uses are located to the south. The Dare manufacturing facility is to the east. The existing lot was previously used for a warehouse and office space. Next slide, please. This slide shows the draft plan of condominium. The owner of the subject lands is proposing a vacant land condominium that would consist of 5 units. 4 of the units each contain a 6-story, 64-unit mixed-use building. The 5th interior unit will contain a 1-story parking structure. Internal drive aisles, sidewalks, landscaped areas will all make up the common element. This mixed-use development is permitted on the lands as per the policies of the city's official plan and regulations in the city's zoning bylaw. The purpose of this application is not to determine the permitted uses, as the uses are permitted in the current zoning. Rather, the purpose of the application is to permit the individual ownership, the tenure of each of the units. The site plan for the development is approved and under construction. Next slide, please. As I just mentioned, this is the approved site plan for the site. The site plan received full site plan approval for the mixed-use buildings containing a total of 256 residential units with commercial units on the ground floor in November 2021. The property also received Committee of Adjustment approval for a reduced parking rate and relief from side yard and rear yard requirements. It should also be noted that Building A, located in the bottom right corner of the screen at 58th Avenue, has already received a building permit and construction has begun. Next slide, please. The proposal development conforms to provincial, regional, and city plans. It is compatible with surrounding land uses and represents good planning. As such, staff recommend that draft plan of condominium be approved, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report. That concludes my presentation, and if there are any questions, I will answer them at the appropriate time.
I see you have your hand up, Councillor Gazzola. Can we wait till after the delegation?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. No, not a problem. Okay, so I just also should point out that Mr. Garrett Stevenson, the Manager of Development, is also in attendance and available to answer any questions. Thank you for your presentation. Our first delegation is Brandon Fluwell and Mike Maxwell. You have 5 minutes to make are you going together or are you going separate?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will make say a few remarks, and Mr. Maxwell is available just should there be any questions.
Okay.
So thank you for your time, and Mr. Seiler, thank you for your presentation. As noted, my name is Brandon Fluwelling, and I'm the planning consultant to 55 Franklin GP Inc., the developer of the proposed condominium. And also joining me today, available to answer any questions, is Mr. Mike Maxwell from 55 Franklin GP Inc. We've reviewed the staff report and listened to the presentation, and certainly are in support of the recommendations provided. The application, as noted by Mr. Seiler, is a unique mixed-use affordable housing development consisting of 4 mixed-use buildings, each at 6 stories, and containing 64 residential units, along with ground floor commercial space, a central parking area, and some amenity space. As noted, the development has received full site plan approval, and we're now seeking permission for the draft plan of condominium to permit the ultimate condominium ownership or the tenure of the units. As noted, the site work has commenced, and the former warehouse on the property is scheduled to be demolished by the end of the month, with the expectation that all on-site services would be completed by the end of July. Assuming everything goes according to plan, the first residential occupancy is anticipated for December 1st. So as noted, we've reviewed the staff report and the proposed draft plan conditions, and we're here to answer any questions that the committee may have of us.
Mr. Maxwell, did you want to add anything?
Nothing specific other than what Brandon had highlighted, that we're in full support of the staff report, but also available for any questions that may come up at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll start with questions for the delegations. Is Mr. or Councillor Gazzola, did you have a question for staff or for the delegation?
Just for staff.
Okay, I don't see any questions for you. Thank you very much for coming in. And I'll now turn it back to Councillor Gazzola for questions for staff.
Yeah, and it's not really much of a question. It's more of a learning exercise for me. This is a little different than all of the applications we've been dealing with. There's no zone change or official plan change, correct? Where did staff go?
Yep, through the chair, that is correct. There is no official plan amendment. There is no zoning bylaw amendment. This is just for the vacant land condo, which is the form of tenure for the property, and it requires a statutory public meeting under the Planning Act.
Yeah. So there was a site plan meeting that gave approval, right? So council has had no say in this project up to this point, right? There's no mechanism for council to have any say in it.
Through the chair, the site plan has been approved and is currently under construction.
Yeah, well, so as I say, I'm not questioning what we're doing. I just want to question the process and how it works. So what, the only reason we're even dealing with it now is that the owners want to make it into a condominium corporation, right? And so they need the city's approval to do that.
Through the chair, so they do need the city's approval to make it a vacant land condo, which is a form of subdivision, which allows the units to be individually owned and then can be commenced construction at separate times.
Okay, that's so it's a little different than what we normally deal with. Yeah. So no, those are my only questions. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. I just want to add to that question. Why was this not done when the site plan approval went through? Like, is it because it wasn't originally going to be condos? It was going to be rentals or apartment buildings?
Sorry, I saw Mr. Stevenson jumped on as well. Sorry, go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I may, I might suggest that maybe a question for the applicant. So we will review and provide recommendations on applications in the order they are received. It is quite typical that a site plan approval project will receive site plan review approval prior to going to a division process, whether that be through the Committee of Adjustment, through a standard plan of condominium approval, which is delegated to staff, or a vacant land condo, which requires the statutory public meeting, which is in front of you this evening. So it is typical that this process would follow. This condominium, as Mr. Seiler had identified, is 4 units, one with each building. We're not looking at individual residential units here. We're looking at 4 units, each one with a building, and a 5th unit with a parking garage building.
Okay, thank you. I saw Mr. Maxwell had his hand up. Did you want to add to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify in the plan of condominium. City staff are correct in terms of process. Site plan would come first, and then the vacant land condo. To be clear, though, we're not condominiumizing each building into what you would more traditionally see, where there might be 50, 60 condos in each building. This is a vacant land condo, so each building will be a unit by itself. The purpose of that are simply to arrange construction financing and development financing one building at a time. This is still a rental project in the affordable housing world. It is not, each apartment will not end up being for sale. It's just so that each of the 4 apartment blocks can be financed and constructed at different times.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Any other questions or comments for staff or for, no? Can I get a mover for this item?
Yeah, I would move it, it's in Ward 3. I'll move it, please.
Okay, Councillor Gazzola. No more comments? So the motion we'll be voting on is that the City of Kitchener, pursuant to Section 5131 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, CP 13 is amended, and bylaw 2002-164, the City of Kitchener is amended. Grant draft approval to the condominium application 30 CDM 22203 for 55 Franklin Street South in the City of Kitchener, subject to the conditions shown in Appendix A. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much for coming in. The next item on the agenda is regarding an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 276 King Street East. And I see there's one delegation, but we'll first go to a 5-minute presentation from Senior Planner Andrew Pennell.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Mayor, and councillors. Through you, Madam Chair. This presentation is to discuss an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by 276 King East Inc. Next slide, please. The subject property is located at the intersection of King Street East and Evie Street North in the Market District of downtown and is addressed as 276 King Street East. The portion of the property closest to King Street is vacant, while the portion of the lands furthest from King Street contains a building that was originally constructed as a single detached dwelling. The surrounding area contains a wide range of land uses and building forms. The Kitchener Market is located immediately across Evie Street to the east. The Yeti Cafe is located immediately to the north on Evie Street. The lands to the west on King Street are occupied with commercial businesses. The subject lands are within a major transit station area, being located less than 250 meters from the Kitchener Market Ion Station. The property has excellent access to LRT, bus transit, cycling, and pedestrian infrastructure. Next slide, please. The subject property is identified as being within 2 urban structure components on map 2 of the city's official plan: urban growth center downtown and major transit station area. The property is designated on map 4, the land use map of the official plan, as Market District. The property is currently split zoned under bylaw 85-1, with the portion of the lands closest to King Street zoned East Market Zone, or D2, and the portion furthest from King Street being zoned D3, or East or Market Village Zone. The lands are currently not subject to the comprehensive review of the zoning bylaw, or bylaw 2019-051 at this time. Next slide, please. The applicant is requesting an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment to facilitate redevelopment of the subject property with a mixed-use building comprising ground floor commercial uses and 29 dwelling units within the upper stories. The official plan amendment would add a site-specific policy to permit the building to have a maximum floor space ratio of 4.8 and a maximum building height of 28.5 meters or 7 stories. The zoning bylaw amendment would change the zoning of the whole of the property to D2 zone with a special regulation provision to permit the aforementioned floor space ratio and building height, and to require a rooftop amenity area, to prohibit residential uses on the ground floor, to not require parking for motor vehicles, to require bicycle parking, both secured storage for tenants of the building as well as for visitors to the building, and to regulate the front, rear, and side yard setbacks, as well as to prohibit outdoor storage, excluding the display of goods for retail purposes. A holding provision is also proposed. The applicant is in support of this. This is at the region's request to ensure that a detailed noise study is completed to the satisfaction of the region before the establishment of any residential or other sensitive land uses. Next slide, please. You'll see on this particular slide, there are two images. The site concept that the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment would facilitate has evolved significantly since the pre-submission stages through to the concept that is now recommended for endorsement, as outlined in the urban design brief, which is attachment C to the staff report. The original concept was 8 stories in height and had very little relief along King Street and Eby Street. You can see it's very boxy in its form. The concept that is endorsed is 7 stories in height and has step backs on King Street. Also, this concept has noteworthy building articulation that provides visual interest and relief on both King Street and Eby Street. Next slide, please. I'm suggesting that this particular property and these applications present an excellent opportunity to benefit and improve downtown and the city. If approved, the proposal would increase the housing supply within a major transit station area, facilitate the construction of transit supportive mid-rise building form, create investment in the market district and in downtown, redevelop an underutilized parcel, establish a mix of commercial and residential uses on the same property, and contribute to a complete community. Next slide, please. Accordingly, planning staff is of the opinion that the requested amendments would facilitate a 7-story mixed-use building are consistent with the policies of the provincial policy statement. The applications are conform to the growth plan as well as the regional official plan and the city's official plan and represent good planning. Planning staff accordingly recommends that the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw be adopted, the zoning bylaw amendment be approved, and the urban design brief be endorsed to provide general direction for the future site plan process. This concludes my presentation. I thank you for your time, and I'm here for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you for your presentation. Before we go to questions, we do have one delegation. So if Kristen Barrisdale is available, please, from GSP Group, please go ahead with your presentation.
Good afternoon once again. Kristen Barrisdale from GSP Group. We are the agents acting on behalf of Pioneer Tower Homes, the current registered property owner of the site. Next slide, please. I'll keep my presentation very brief. Mr. Pennell has touched on a number of the requests that we're making. I'll just provide a little bit of more context to the proposed development, as well as some of the changes that have happened or evolved since our initial discussions with the city for pre-submission and then subsequent application. As Mr. Pennell pointed out, the site, as you see here, is outlined in red. It's located at the east end of downtown Kitchener. It's immediately west of the Kitchener Market. This area of King Street is generally comprised of existing commercial, community, office, and institutional uses, with low-rise residential uses kind of on the periphery of the downtown as you move towards more north of King Street and more south of King Street. The site is proximate to a number of existing amenities, including the market, Kitchener Public Library, the museum, Center in the Square, as well as a number of parks and schools. And the site is also approximately 120 meters north of the LRT on Charles Street and the associated station. Next slide, please. Just to provide some context to the committee in terms of existing buildings of mid to higher heights in the downtown area. Those areas, or those properties identified in blue, are those such existing buildings ranging in height from about 3 stories upwards to 39 stories at the corner of Duke and Frederick. Next slide, please. This is a 2-dimensional, or the ground floor elevation of the proposed development. It is a 7-story building, as Mr. Pannell touched on, with 29 residential units proposed. The ground floor does contain commercial units. It has a combined space of about 2,000 square feet for the commercial units, and the intent is that there would be a larger unit of approximately 1,600 square feet and a smaller unit of approximately 400 square feet. You can see on this concept that the principal entrance to the existing or the proposed residential uses is off Eby Street. It's labeled as the principal entrance. And then the entrance to the commercial units would be directly from King Street. The proposed development also includes a dedicated service area at the rear of the property that would allow for loading, moving rooms, and that's where the bicycle storage would be permitted as well. Next slide, please. So this is an elevation or a depiction of the proposed development as if you were standing at the corner on Eby Street looking at the site. King Street is on your left-hand side of the screen. As you can see, this articulates some of the building step backs that have been incorporated into the proposed development, as Mr. Pannell touched on. The first step back you see is at the 5th story. You'll see a second step back at the 6th story, and then you'll see a larger step back at the 7th story. This step back has been provided to accommodate for a larger rooftop amenity space that will be used by future residents. Next slide, please. And these are just elevations provided from 2 different angles. The one on your left-hand side is the elevation of the building as if you were standing on King Street looking towards it. You can see that Eby Street is on your right-hand side. And then the graphic or diagram on your right-hand side of the screen is if you were looking at the rear of the building from Eby Street up towards King Street. So in this perspective, you see Eby Street on the left-hand side of the building. Next slide, please. Just some renderings that have been prepared and are included as part of the urban design brief that Council is considering this evening. You'll see King Street and Eby Street on the left-hand side of the screen. You can see the access point for the commercial uses. And then if you refer to the figure on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the principal access to the lobby of the residential use. And then slightly offset, you'll see the service area. Next slide, please. I won't spend too much time on this. As Mr. Pannell touched on, we are proposing to maintain the market district designation and looking for site-specific policy that would permit a maximum FSR 4.8 and a maximum building height of 7 stories. Next slide, please. Again, this just to reiterate some of the setbacks and site-specific variances we're requiring. First and foremost, an FSR of 4.8 and a building height of 7 stories or 2.85 meters. A number of these requirements or requests are to reflect the uniqueness of the site and specific design regulations or development standards that are being employed. Of note, that Mr. Pannell touched on is as we continue to work through the application with the city, one of the requirements, we didn't initially include a requirement for the rooftop amenity space. That was at a request of city staff, which we have no objection providing. And we're also providing slightly more than the minimum requirement in terms of indoor bike parking as well as outdoor visitor bike parking. Next slide, please. Finally, in support of the proposed application, there were a number of reports and studies prepared and submitted to the city: a pedestrian wind study, an urban design brief, planning justification report, functional servicing report, parking review and justification, an environmental noise and vibration study, and a tree management plan. As Mr. Pannell touched on, we do acknowledge the holding provision. The noise study was submitted in support of the application, but there were some technical clarifications and questions that were requested from the Region of Waterloo that we continue to work through. So we've agreed to put the holding provision on site as we work through those. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your presentation. I see one question. Councillor Marsh, go ahead.
Thanks very much, and thanks, Ms. Barisdale, for coming in. I'm wondering about whether or not there are going to be limitations on the types of commercial uses there on the main floor. Have those been discussed?
Through you, Madam Chair, we are not proposing any additional specific restrictions or additional uses beyond what is permitted under the current zoning right now. So the range of retail and commercial uses that are permitted within the district zone are the ones that we're proposing to allow for on this site.
Okay, great. And what about in my previous discussions with the property owner, we talked about the possibility for affordable housing to be included in the development. Can you tell me where that's at?
Through you, Madam Chair, the size of this development, as you can appreciate, is quite small and quite unique. These will likely be 1 bedroom or 1 bedroom plus den. The likeliness of them achieving the affordable housing definition from an ownership perspective is high in this situation. Because of the scale and the number of units that are being provided, there was no specific contemplation given to identifying affordable housing units for rental. But again, the nature of the size of the units themselves lend themselves to affordable housing ownership.
So they are going to be condos?
We're not certain at this point as to what the tenure is going to be.
Okay. And in your main entrance for the residence, is there an elevator at that spot?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, there would be an elevator required for residents. There's no elevator required for the commercial uses because they will remain on the ground floor.
Right, but I guess the two, there's different elevations. So so will both commercial spaces be visitable, like completely able to be accessed by somebody with mobility devices?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, there will be sidewalks that surround the entire site. The commercial uses will have direct access to King Street, so they can be directly accessed. They will obviously be required to adhere to the AODA standards.
Right.
And then the elevator in the unit, in the building will be just for residents, and that also will meet AODA standards.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you for your questions. I just had a couple questions myself. You talk about the minimum bicycle parking requirement. So what is that in this case? And also, if you could speak to the security of the bike parking.
Absolutely, and I will defer to Andrew on this if I get this wrong, but the current standard in the city's bylaw is 0.5 bicycle parking spaces, secured bicycle parking spaces per unit. I think. So we would be required to provide 15 spaces because we have 29 residential units. And I think that the requirement is, I'm not sure, to be honest with you, what the non-secure outside parking and visitor parking would be, but we're providing a total of 33 secure bike parking spaces for 29 residential units. They will be provided in a secure bicycle room, so only residents of the building or only those living in the building would have security access, whether it's a code or whether it's a PIN code or whatnot. It would be only access provided to those who live in the building and not visitors. The visitor bike parking would be provided at the outside of the building through typical bike standards and rings that you would see surrounding buildings outside.
Thank you. Mr. Pennell, did you want to add to that?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. So just to expand upon what Kristen mentioned about bicycle parking, the number of short-term publicly accessible bicycle parking spaces required under the proposed bylaw is 12. And I confirm that it's 33 long-term secured bicycle parking spaces, as Kristen mentioned. I can confirm that.
And is that even with car parking? The number is that low, for that number of units? Or is that irrelevant in this case?
I would say that's a fairly high number considering the number of units that are proposed in this building.
No. I'm not complaining or questioning the number. I'm just questioning whether the number of spaces required would be 12 if, as a minimum. Does that change at all as a minimum requirement when we're talking about a development site that has no car parking?
Through you, Madam Chair. So This is under the old bylaw, so technically there is no requirement for any bicycle parking under the bylaw. If this was under the new bylaw, yes, the number of secured and unsecured bicycle parking spaces would be dependent upon the number of units.
Okay. I know I'm going off track a bit, but that's fine. Just my other question had to do with the setback. So Yeti, the Yeti restaurant, is it right behind? Well, I think you said beside. Is it a 2-meter setback from Yeti? Is that what your report said?
So the setback to the Yeti Cafe is I want to confirm, 4.0 meters.
Okay, right from the edge of their property, presumably. Yeah. Okay, any other questions for staff or for the delegation? No? Can I get a mover for this? Councillor Ioannidis? So comments? None? So yes, go ahead. Comments.
Thanks, Chair Chapman. Just wanted to say, I think from what was the original proposal to what is being proposed now with the design concept, it's rather very attractive. I applaud the work of the proponent and with its design and making good design, which is right beside the market. I think it'll add a lot of value to the community.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, I can also add that, I've heard a lot of positive feedback about this particular development. I have had some concerns as well, but those have been addressed for the most part. We do need more housing in the city, as we all know, and this is an additional option. So I'm pleased to support it.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Okay, so the motion reads that official plan, first A, that official plan amendment application OPA 20006 KAP for 276 King East Inc. requesting to add site-specific policy area 5 to map 4, urban growth center downtown of the official plan, and to add associated site-specific policy 15D 268 to the official plan to permit a mixed-use building with a maximum floor space ratio of 4.8 and a maximum building height of 28.5 meters or 7 stories be adopted in the form shown in the official plan amendment attached to report DSD 2022-213 as an attachment A, and accordingly forwarded to the Regional Municipality of Waterloo for approval. B, that the zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 20015 KAP for 276 King East Inc. be approved in the form shown in the proposed bylaw and map number 1 attached to report DSD 2022-2013 as attachment B, and C, that in accordance with Planning Act Section 45, 1.3 and 1.4, that applications for minor variances shall be permitted for land subject to zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 20015 KAP. And finally, D, that the urban design brief for 276 King Street East prepared by GSP Group dated May 2022, attached to report DSD 2022-213 as attachment C, be endorsed and provide general direction for the future site plan development. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. So we will now break until 6 o'clock when we will go into part B of the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee meeting. Have a good dinner.
If I could ask, Madam Chair, do you know how many delegates we have for the next item?
Currently, we have 7, and I don't know if any more have been added, but that's what I thought.
Very good, thank you.
Okay. Have a good dinner.
Just for the purpose of those people that are in attendance, we will be using the same live stream. So if you are watching the YouTube channel between this meeting and the following meeting, you will need to hit refresh prior to the 6 o'clock start, just to make sure your stream starts as anticipated. For those that start watching the meeting at 6, you will not have any issues. I just want to make sure for those people that are potentially going to be watching all the way through.
Diana, this is the same link for us?
That's
Will you-
correct. We will be
will
using
we-
the same, yep, that is correct. We'll be using the same string, link as well as the same YouTube feed. So I just want to make that clear, as we had a couple people that logged in early for the.
Public body that would otherwise have an ability to appeal a decision of the City of Kitchener to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make a written submission to the city. Before the bylaws pass, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. There's one item on the agenda this evening, and that is regarding 146 to 162 Victoria Street and 92 to 110 Park Street. There are several delegations signed up to speak this evening, but we'll begin with a 5-minute presentation from Senior Planner Eric Schneider. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair, Mayor, and members of Council. My name is Eric Schneider, and I'm a Senior Planner at the City of Kitchener. I'm here tonight to make a recommendation for approval of an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment to facilitate a mixed-use, 3-tower, 1,124 unit development. As we move to the next slide, I will discuss the site context. The site is located on the corner of Victoria Street South and Park Street on the north side of Victoria. The site is located within the Urban Growth Center, or UGC. The site is about 600 meters from the LRT Central Station on King Street, or about a 7-minute walk. To the north of the site is the city-owned Bram Yards at 55 Bram Street, currently used as a surface parking lot, and the Garment Street development, a high-density, multi-tower, mixed-use development. To the south, west, and east, across Park Street and Victoria Street, are land-zoned mixed-use, containing a mix of residential and commercial sites. In regards to park access, the site is located between Cherry Park and Victoria Park. Both are a short walking distance. The site itself is a consolidation of 7 parcels that form a large corner site. On the site now is a mixture of 1 to 3-story buildings ranging from duplex dwellings, warehouses, and a printing shop. The next slide shows the applicant's concept plan.
My apologies, Eric. The slide is not loading properly, so we're just going to ensure that it's loaded in 1 second.
Okay, there's the concept plan. At street level, there would be a 4 to 6-story podium that wraps the street edge and 3 towers of 38, 36, and 25 stories in height. On the ground floor, 1,750 square meters of commercial space is proposed. A large human-scaled pedestrian plaza is proposed on the corner of Victoria and Park Streets that will serve as the focal point and primary entrance to the site, as shown in the rendering picture on screen. In total, the site is proposing 699 vehicle parking spaces and 692 bicycle parking spaces. The next slide highlights the opportunity with this development application. To facilitate a high-intensity mixed-use development that is compatible with the Urban Growth Center, to add visual interest at the street level and the skyline with a high level of urban design, to create a transit-oriented development that will encourage alternate modes of transportation, such as cycling, walking, and using the LRT. And finally, to foster an efficient use of land, infrastructure, and services through high-density development. On the next slide, I will go over the highlights and key policy information regarding the requested zoning and official plan amendments. Staff is recommending approval of the official plan amendment, which would establish a site-specific policy area to allow the increase in floor space ratio, FSR. And staff is recommending approval of the zoning bylaw amendment, which would change the zoning to mix 3, establish a holding provision to ensure a record of site condition is completed to address on-site contamination, and to establish a new site-specific that would lay out zoning regulations for the development, including street line setbacks, building height, floor space ratio, commercial space, facade widths and openings, and minimum parking standards. It is staff's opinion that the requested applications demonstrate good planning principles and are consistent with provincial, regional, and city planning policies. The next slide shows the proposed zoning map, and that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. So before we go to questions, I first mentioned that we have Mr. Garrett Stevenson, the Manager of Development, is present. So when we do get to questions, he's also available to answer questions. So we'll go to delegations. But first of all, I understand there have been some recent written submissions. Can the clerk please give us that information?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you. I would just like to confirm for the record that we've received late written submissions from P. Nichols, V. Lebreche, and M. Garrett's, which have been circulated.
Okay, thank you for that. I'd also like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. You will be made a panelist prior to your name being called. Once you have joined the meeting as a panelist, you will have access to your microphone and camera. Please leave your video camera turned off and your microphone audio muted until you are called upon to speak. One last reminder for delegations, please do not take offense if following your presentations there are no questions for council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared with us from our community members. Councillor Johnston, I saw you had your hand up. Do you have questions for staff?
I did. I can ask them later if you would rather, and we do the delegations first. Thank you.
And Councillor Marsh?
Yeah, I was late to the beginning of the meeting, so I apologize. I actually need to declare a conflict because I own property within 100 meters of this site. So I will step away from the meeting.
And you'll submit the relevant documentation. Thank you. Okay, so our first delegation will be Kirsten Barrisdale from GSP Group and Henry Burstein from IBI Group and Stephen Roos from Dove Capital. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, unless you're doing it as is 5 minutes enough, or should I give you 10?
Good evening, Madam Chair. We had been coordinating with the clerk in advance of this meeting, and she had indicated, because we've got multiple people speaking, that we would have 10 minutes for our delegation.
Okay, go ahead.
So as you touched on, my name is Kristen Barrisdale from GSP Group. We are the agents acting on behalf of DOV Capital with respect to the proposed development. I have Henry Burstein here from IBI Group. He is the architect. He's going to walk you through the proposed development and touch on some of the key design considerations. We also have Stephen Roos and Shmuel Zimmerman here from DOV Capital. And we also have Erica Bailey participating in the call this evening. She's not going to formally be part of our presentation. She's from Paradigm Transportation Solutions and is available to answer any technical questions that may come up related to traffic. Just a really quick outline. So I'm just going to briefly take you through some context of the site. I'm going to turn it over to Henry, who's going to give you a synopsis of the proposed development. I'm going to come back and give you a brief presentation of the initial community benefits package by comparison to the proposed most recent community benefits package. And then Mr. Roos and Mr. Zimmerman will provide closing remarks with regards to the proposed development. Next slide, please. So the graphics that you see on your screen here are essentially a summary of land uses and existing community amenities within walking distance to the site. The inner circle is those that are located within 400 meters of the site, and the outer circle are those that are located within 800 meters of the site. The graphic on your left-hand side, you'll note that it's color coded. The green areas indicate existing park space. The blue areas indicate those properties that are already existing mixed use or designated for future mixed use. The orange is industrial area. The yellow is low rise residential development. And then on the right-hand side of your screen, it's an indication of the existing transportation networks that surround the property. The green along the property frontage is existing Grand River Transit services. The blue just north of the site is existing LRT services. As Mr. Schneider pointed out, there is an existing transit station that's within walking distance to the proposed site. And then the yellow is existing I-Express or frequent rapid transit routes. And then finally, the area in the orange is the existing trail and walking systems that are in close proximity to the site. At this point now, I'm going to turn it over to Henry, and he's going to walk you through the proposed development. Next slide, please.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Again, my name is Henry Burston. I'm a director at IBI Group. And just as a background from our firm and my beliefs, we believe in creating projects which are urban and improve the quality of the pedestrian and public realm, create more diversity in uses along sidewalks to create more engaging street life, create more sustainable and durable buildings, and create opportunities for home ownership. So in this respect, the project I'm presenting to you today, in my opinion, achieves all of those objectives. In addition, my colleague Kristen will continue to outline changes that we've made based on city staff's feedback and community feedback. The city planner did a very good job in describing the site, and I can summarize the existing site as follows. It's a highly underutilized lot, which is car-oriented and not urban. The site's location is ideal to support public transit infrastructure and allow for additional support to local retail by putting feet on the street. And the future context shows how the site is positioned to be a gateway into the innovation district. So we are proposing 1,124 units within 3-point block towers and a podium. The project has been designed with a 6-story mixed-use podium, which provides an urban street edge along Victoria and Park Street. From this, 3-point block towers are proposed, the southwest at 38 stories, northwest at 36, and southeast at 25 stories in height, with compact floor plates ranging from 770 to 850 square meters in size. The towers are set back 3 meters from the podiums for the southwest and northwest towers, and 22 meters for the 25-story building. The arrangement of the towers is to allow for both separations and staggering of overlapping faces to allow for more clear views. You'll also see that the plan has extensive landscaping around the perimeter with new street trees along Victoria and planters along Park Street. There are 3 access points proposed into the site, one on the south, which will act as a pass-through, almost a porte cochere. The second from Park to a dropped paved area, providing access to the lobbies, and a third one from a private driveway. This provides access to all the garbage and loading facilities, which are completely enclosed and hidden from view. The podium will contain retail and residential functions and provide on top of it an outdoor amenity space that links the 2 buildings on top of an above grade parking structure which is completely hidden from view and enclosed in materials that are equivalent to the rest of the facade. On top of that, we're also providing about 17,000 square feet of outdoor amenity space, and a green roof has been proposed on top of the link. Next slide. Our primary goal was to allow for wider sidewalks and potential for the inside to activate the outside pedestrian and public realm. The ground floor has been specifically set back an additional 10 feet to allow for wider sidewalks and weather protection. So along Victoria Street, you have sidewalk widths that are anywhere from 29 to 26 feet in depth. And as you move along Park, those are about 21 feet at the most critical corner at the north. And the corner that you can see is really going to be a special place. It's the ideal place for a cafe or a restaurant. And that corner with the sidewalks measures about 70 by 58. So it's quite a large, open and engaging space for the corner. We have retail wrapping around the corner as well. And the residential lobbies are all addressing the drop-off. And then there will be a wonderful pedestrian use leading into this open courtyard. The north side is also reserved for grade-related units. Next slide. So here you can see a perspective looking north. We really wanted to pick up on the scale of the podium at 4+2 expression. So we've introduced rich, durable materials, which can have a modern and industrial warehouse feel, but also strongly identify as residential mixed-use buildings. The upper mansards are made lighter and continue with a similar rhythm. We've punctuated the corner and created a really generous space at the ground floor and a vertical expression to create what is really going to be something that's going to be a very nice silhouette on the skyline. We may even be able to light up the undersides of the balconies, really to create something quite special at the corner. Next slide. We have 3 different tower expressions, but all within the same aesthetic family. And there's slight variations in heights on the podium also to create a lot of variety and interest. Next slide. And here's another vantage point. You can go to the next slide, please. There's been a tremendous amount of detail put into the pedestrian realm. Large manicured sidewalks, landscaping, a cast glass above that area that's going to be for restaurants, rich masonry tying into the context, and those building setbacks that we talked about to create those wide sidewalks for the pedestrians. We really envision this corner as something that's going to add a lot to the city life, a place where people can dine in a restaurant or enjoy a coffee and meet friends. And next slide. And we're also going to be putting a similar type of investment within the ground plane with significant improvements to paving, street furniture, plantings with a wide variety of rich materials within the sidewalk. So really what we're trying to achieve with this is to create a project that has a vibrant, urban, and highly engaging pedestrian environment, and also be a wonderful addition to the Kitchener skyline. And with that, I'll pass it back to Kristen.
Next slide, please. So as part of the initial application package that was submitted to the city in August of 2021, there were a number of considerations proposed as part of the community benefits package. The first one was the provision of 50 residential units that meet the definition of affordable housing in terms of ownership as per the 2020 provincial policy statement and regional official plan. There was a notation for affordable housing contribution. So it was a financial commitment to a nonprofit affordable housing provider to support the development of off-site affordable housing within the city of Kitchener. Next slide, please. Thirdly, there was a commitment to public amenity space. It noted the ground floor plaza space at the base of the tower at the intersection of Park and Victoria, and noted approximately 265 square meters of size that would be available for public use. And finally, the initial proposal included the outfitting of a public amenity space contribution. The details of this were yet to be confirmed, but the intent was to provide a WeWork type of space that would be used to accommodate those who are working in the building or those who want to work from home. It would have provision of meeting spaces, individual workstations, etc. Next slide, please. In response to continued conversations with the city, as well as a number of public meetings and neighborhood information sessions that were held, we submitted a revised community benefits package to the city in May of this year. And I'm just going to go through what the new revised package include. So similarly to the first proposal, it includes 50 residential units, again, that meet the definition of affordable housing as per the PPS and regional official plan. And this is affordable housing in terms of affordable home ownership. Secondly, the public amenity space. So again, the plaza is maintained at the base of Park Street and Victoria Street, providing approximately 265 square meters, as well as additional enhanced streetscapes along Victoria Street and Park Street. The plaza is intended for public use and will be associated with the ground floor amenity and commercial spaces. And as noted, there will be enhanced streetscapes along Park Street in Victoria that would include enhanced surface treatments, mature trees where applicable or where we can put them, hardscape surfaces, public seating, as well as enhanced landscape features. In addition to this, we also noted as part of our submission that the proposed development is providing a rather significant portion of private amenity space for future residents. As Mr. Bernstein touched on, there's approximately 1,700 square meters of outdoor amenity space that's going to be provided to residents in those rooftop terraces and landscaped areas. There are going to be both active and passive spaces there for residents. So whether there will be small scale activity, lounging, congregation areas. In addition, there's going to be approximately 1,500 square meters of indoor amenity space that's also provided for the residents. So this would include social and entertainment areas, active recreational areas, and community rooms. Next slide, please. The revised community benefits package included the devotion of amenity space for neighborhood association. So we are proposing to provide for meeting rooms or other comparable spaces to be used by either the Victoria Park Neighborhood Association and or the Cherry Park Association for up to 10 hours per month. This will be written into the condo declaration, providing for this opportunity for those neighborhood associations. Fourthly, some of the feedback that we heard from our neighborhood meeting, as well as follow-up discussions with the city, is the concern from residents and the public with respect to the provision of 3-bedroom units. So the proposed development has been revised to include the provision of 30 3-bedroom units, which includes 13 traditional 3-bedroom units that will be offered right off the bat, and then 17 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom units that can be combined and available for purchase as 3-bedroom units if so desired. Next slide, please. And then DOV Capital is proposing a financial contribution of $500,000 to a nonprofit local affordable housing provider to support the development of offsite affordable housing in the city of Kitchener. So the thought process that went into this community benefits package that you're seeing this evening, the proposed community benefits package, was more of a comprehensive consideration. The benefits package provides a number of benefits to different community initiatives and amenities rather than just devoting to affordable housing or park contribution. It's our opinion that this is a robust package that meets a number of different development different community considerations for the betterment of the immediately surrounding community as well as the broader community. And at this point now, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Roos and Mr. Zimmerman from DOV Capital to give us some closing remarks. Next slide, please.
I guess we'd like to thank all of you for your time this evening. I think we've created a very beautiful development for downtown Kitchener. It's a great gateway project. It's transit oriented. I just wanted to emphasize that we did spend an awful lot of time with staff over the course of the last year and a half or so. And more recently, we spent a fair amount of time with the local ratepayers associations and the community groups. I think we'd like to thank Debbie Chapman, Councillor Chapman, for your efforts in connecting us with these community groups. We did have a number of meetings with them. In response to those meetings, we've made some changes to what we've offered. We increased the vehicle parking and bicycle parking. We addressed we heard the concern that people had about 3-bedroom units, and we took it a step further to provide a little bit more robustness to that. So if there's a demand there, we can add 3-bedroom units. And I think more importantly, we've offered a very wide range of unit sizes and types for the community. Lastly, one of the things that came out of our discussions was the the two ratepayer groups would like a home for meetings and such like that. And we looked through a number of different methodologies of achieving that. And we've decided that within the unit itself, we've got considerable amenity space, and we've offered an opportunity for those groups to meet in that amenity space and to share that amenity space within the building, to host their meetings and such. And I guess with that, we'd like to thank everybody for your time tonight, and thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your presentation. So we'll go first for questions for the delegation. Councillor Johnston, did you have a question for the delegation, or is yours for staff later? Staff?
I'm sorry, no, for staff, thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Ioannidis?
Yes, thank you, Chair Chapman. And thanks, gentlemen, for your presentation, and Kristen. And I see you have someone from Paradigm. That's one of my biggest concerns with your development is the traffic, and knowing how congested that traffic is at certain times. I just would like to hear a little bit more about the traffic study that was conducted.
Does somebody from Paradigm want to speak up?
I apologize. As I was joining as panelist, it turned the audio off. Would you mind repeating your question?
Just like to hear the impact of your traffic study.
Sure, of course. So we were retained by Dev Capital to prepare the TIS as a requirement for their application for this development. We reviewed, our scope was approved by both the city and the region. They defined the terms of the study, and we worked together with them to prepare that. The study area that we looked at, surrounding intersections, Victoria and Park, Victoria and Bram, Victoria and Joseph, forecast to 2030, which is kind of anticipated as 5 years beyond full build out. We found there is congestion along Victoria Street, which is no secret. Everybody's aware of that, especially in this neighborhood, I'm sure. We found, sorry, were there specifics that you wanted me to focus on? It's quite a beast of a report.
Well, particularly why was the location for the entry point at basically near the corner and not maybe through the side of the Bram? I can't recall what that street is. I think it's Bram.
So there's two accesses, the one onto Park Street and the one onto Victoria Street. And the one on Park Street is set specifically at a location set back from the intersection of Park and Victoria so that the queuing from the signal does not block the driveway. There was intention behind that. And the access off of Victoria Street, and someone from the team can correct me if I'm getting this wrong, is intended to be for kind of low volume, more drop off coming in and then exiting onto Park Street. It's intended to be right in, right out, if I'm remembering that correctly. And there is access from the Bram Street laneway into the parking garage for residents to use.
Okay, so there is no nothing in the recommendations with regards to reconstruction of that intersection?
Which intersection?
Victoria and Park.
Victoria and Park? No, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. I have questions of staff when it's appropriate.
Okay, Councillor Davey, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I don't have many significant concerns. I'd actually rather like the design look of the building, but the one area that does bother me going forward is this issue of the number of 3-bedroom units. You know, when we're looking at well over 1,000 units total, I just have to ask the question what the flexibility is in possibly bumping that number, that 13 number, up to something higher. Is that a deal breaker, or what can we do here?
if I can respond to that, we had looked at that and Kristen had included it in her presentation. So there are 13 that are built within, and then there's the ability for combining units. So we can basically rise that number up to about 30 units by combining 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms. And we'll have a marketed suite that would basically show people how that unit works, and that would be put on the market as well. So, I mean, my experience is if there's a market there, our client will obviously make provisions to try to fill that market. So right now we have the ability to add almost double to what we started with built into the project, and then I guess we'll see from there where it goes.
So I guess I'm not sure if you can answer this, but my concern is obviously 3-bedroom units they're less profitable to build. So when we're only approving 13, I just don't understand. Who gets to determine whether that number goes up or not? Because if you're saying you have to make as much money on a single 3-bedroom as you would on 2 separate units, that tells me that you're just not going to build those other 17 3-bedroom units. So, I guess what assurances could we have that will be looked at seriously?
I can answer that question. The concept of adding 3-bedroom units is not an issue of they're less profitable. Actually, the 3-bedroom unit and having to put 1 kitchen as opposed to 2 kitchens, having to have 1 entry door, it's a more efficient build. What we have found is because of the larger size, there's just less of a market for it. And the concept of 3-bedroom and sort of affordable housing and a variety of housing types is something that we spent a considerable amount of time discussing with the various ratepayer groups. And that's when we came back with this hybrid idea of we'll offer initially 13 actually built out units that are designed and initially accommodating the 3-bedroom, but as well, we redesigned the towers to allow the 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom creation that they're in existing. And if we see through our marketing process that there's a demand for additional 3-bedrooms, we can offer them to the market and then say, okay, we'll finish this as a 3-bedroom as opposed to a 2-bedroom and a 1-bedroom. So it's something that we're happy to look at. We took that feedback very seriously, and we've created this package of a total of 33-bedroom units that they should have this diversity of housing type within the building. And we're happy to see how that goes along, and all the provisions are made to be able to upgrade from 13 to 30 as the market demands.
Yeah, I appreciate that context. I'll put some thought to it. Thank you.
And the only other thing I can add to that is obviously we're doing 3 buildings. So there's probably going to be different phases that happen with this. So the first phase will obviously basically set the tone in terms of understanding where the market is going. So there's always going to be ability to tweak any of those numbers or the mix as we see where the demand goes. And so it can be there is a time to address it for sure. And if there's definitely that demand, those are things that penthouse floors, top floors often get combined into larger units. That's not a common thing that happens in buildings on the top floors.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your questions. I don't see any other hands up, but I have a few questions. When you talk about the height of the buildings, you talk about 25 stories, 36 and 38. But in fact, is it not more realistic to talk about a 31-story, 42-story, and 44-story building once you put it on top of a 4 to 6-story podium? In fact, I think your final proposal was everything was going to be on a 6-story podium, I think. Is that not correct?
So the 6-story podium is included in the overall height of the towers. We're not proposing another 38 on top of the 6. It's
okay, because I read it. Sorry, because I read it.
So then the numbers that we put on the towers are like total number of floors from the ground floor to the top of the building.
Okay, because I read it to say that these towers were put on top of the podium.
No, no, not at all.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Did you look at all at renewable or alternative sources of energy?
Is that being directed to us or
Yeah,
Kristen?
no, these are questions for you. I have.
Okay, sure. I'm not aware if there's a district energy or any other programs that Kitchener is working on that we would be tying into as one potential alternative. We are not at this point do not have solar panels or other sources of energy that. And I thought I saw something that was restrictive in terms of geothermal on this particular site, that it was a restriction. So at this time, we don't have a building that can produce its own power, independent of the utilities.
Did Mr. Roos want to add to that?
Yeah, there was a program that the region came to us about geothermal. Eric possibly can talk about it a little bit more. We did respond to them that if it's available on a timely basis, time that we can match our building timelines, we'll consider it. But right now, we don't have any more information from them on it. But it is something that we said if it's available, we would consider.
Just through the chair to correct that, it's district energy that they were speaking about. Geothermal would be prohibited because of the on-site contamination. But city staff, policy staff who are working on recommendations to council for district energy did reach out to the applicant and give them information about it.
Okay, when we get to questions for staff, maybe that will come up again. Thank you. The other question I had was, you talk about 50 affordable housing units, ownership units. My concern with that is that, I mean, that's great, but you sell these homes for at affordable housing rate, and whoever buys them there's nothing stopping them, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, there's nothing stopping them from flipping them and selling them at market value. Is that correct?
Yeah, you are correct that there's nothing stopping them from it. And when we embarked on this project and we had a chance to look at, the mandate for affordable housing, and we looked at the complete compendium of items within, what does it mean to have an affordable housing solution and all the different sort of touch points. This was something it's one of them. It's part of the solution. To allow 50 people to buy their first home, because at the time of our development, at this moment in time, they're able to afford it. That means that we're part of the solution. We've allowed 50 families to buy their first home. And yeah, we've allowed them to be able to take advantage of any equity. And we hope the market goes up and they create equity in these homes and they can move on to a larger home or different home as their family grows. But the intention is not to solve everything with it. We've touched a few areas of the affordable housing issue and affordable housing problem, if you want to call it that. And I think we're very proud to be able to have 50 units within the building that people will be able to buy and afford and start their lives there and possibly be their first purchase. I don't see there's a way for us to control what they do afterwards. I think that'll possibly hurt them. And I look at the positive side of it, that there'll be 50 families that will be able to buy their first home in this wonderful building and a gateway to Kitchener and be part of the downtown Kitchener society. And then if they choose to sell it and upgrade, I think that's a great story.
And are these not 1-bedroom units? Are they actually family units or are they 1-bedroom units?
The size of the units, Henry can answer better about the size. Some of them may be 1-bedroom or they may be a studio. It's whatever fits that criteria.
Okay, that's fine. I'm going to pass the questions on to Councillor Johnston. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Chapman, and thank you so much for your presentation tonight. I am I am really trying to look at things now from the future of who are the people that will be living there and what are the amenities and that they need. And we actually had a really great letter come today from the Victoria Park Neighborhood Association with some recommendations from them in terms of things that they would like to see. So thank you for addressing the affordable housing units. I'm wondering if you can maybe speak more to information on designated lands or cash in lieu to increase downtown parkland.
You like us to address that, or was that for staff?
No, that's to you.
Oh, sure, not a problem. We have discussed this with staff as well as with parks. As you know, our development is currently parkland exempt, parkland levy exempt. However, what we have done to address this issue within our development, as you heard, is we've created 16,000 square feet of outdoor amenity space, beautifully programmed rooftop gardens, as well as you heard Henry talk about the extremely wide 30-foot front yard boulevards where people can come down, people can go for a walk, they can meet. The front of the sort of the gateway to the development is a large 50 by 70 piazza area. So when we talk about parklands, we've satisfied what the planning criteria was for parkland, but we've gone above that and we've created 16,000 square feet of sort of parkland within our development to allow for the residents within the development, and to an extent on the exterior as well for the public, to be able to enjoy this outdoor space. So when you talk about parklands and sort of how we address it, there are beautiful parks in the area that the residents have access to, but as well, there's a lot of on-site amenity space that function and program to have park space for the residents within the development itself.
Yeah, thank you. I think that that's going to be extremely important, even though you were exempt from that piece. We know that parkland certainly is a pressure in the downtown, and with that many people coming to that congregated area, that green space is going to be extremely important to them. I did want to highlight as well the amenity space that you have set aside for neighborhood associations, and I wanted to just say thank you for that as well, because that community space is going to be really important in that building. So thank you.
Well, I mean, you should just as a adjunct. When we started this project, it was actually the very first ask that we heard. That we should create a space for the neighborhood associations to be able to come to, hold their meetings free of charge. And it's something that we spent a fair bit of time figuring out how to do it. And we're glad to be able to have created this provision within the building for the neighborhood associations to use the space.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston. I just wanted to add to the question about community space. So you're proposing 10 hours a month to be shared with the two neighborhood associations, the Cherry Park and the Victoria Park. Are you going to, well, first of all, once the building sells and is taken over by a condo corp, then what control do you have on ensuring that those 10 hours a month are kept available to the neighborhood associations?
What we're going to do is put within the condominium declarations. I mean, ultimately, the condominium will be managed by a board of directors, and there'll be a management company that's hired to administer it. So what we will be doing is people baking into the condominium declarations the ability for the ratepayers groups to use the space as we've indicated. And what we're envisioning is a methodology is that those groups that want to, for example, within the Cherry Hill Association that may want to use it for whatever purpose, they would go to that association. The association would in turn go to the condominium management, and there would be a process in place for them to book the room and to reserve the room and have the use of the room.
Okay, so at that point, it's out of your hands, correct?
Correct.
Right, okay. Regarding the public amenity space, can you just explain it to me? Because I what I'm envisioning, like that's available to the public, not the roof tower, the rooftop amenity spaces. And I think that's really important for residents of the buildings. But you talk about this entranceway at Victoria and Park, and it's I forget the size, 200 and some odd square meters. Is that just sort of the entranceway to the building, or is it going to be a parkette? Is it going to be, what is it? Is it just that you've set the building back slightly and you're calling it now public amenity space?
Well, actually, we are, portion of that building is, we're talking about the entire intersection, first of all, but portion of the building is actually cut out. So there was a rendering that we showed as part of the presentation, which you could see that we've actually carved out a portion of the ground floor to really open up that, that corner and engage with the corner. So I think that definitely there's an engagement of allowing the public through there, but I also hope that there's enough flexibility within that arrangement and the way that the City of Kitchener works, that you could have outdoor seating that is associated with coffee shops or a restaurant or other things that kind of bleed into that space and really create a highly activated corner. That's really what we'd like to see. We want to see something that not only we've done really a lot of effort trying to create something dramatic in terms of the tower expression at the corner, but really the idea was we want to wrap that corner with retail uses and try to create as lively an animated street life as we can. So that's kind of the idea of that piazza. And there is a portion, you don't get the sense of it fully from the site plan. Really from the ground floor is where you get the best sense of it, because it is underneath the portions of that point block tower.
Right. Okay. One last question, and then I'll stop. You talk about giving $500,000 as a donation to a not-for-profit. So per unit, that works out to about $445. Do you think that's enough? Like, do you think this is, what you can afford to donate for that cause?
Yeah, I think $500,000 is an extremely generous gesture in terms of the community benefits overall package. When we look at our overall benefit package, it's not about just the quantum of the donation. It's about everything that we've provided, from the 50 units to the 3 bedrooms to the amenity space for neighborhood groups. We have to look at the package in total. We've designed our building really to be something to be proud of in Kitchener. When we first started, and we were understanding what the site was, the word that we heard again and again was a gateway site into downtown Kitchener, and we took that very seriously in terms of what does it look like when you're coming down Victoria, coming down into downtown. And we've taken the time to create the community within it. And there's a lot of things that cost us as developers, big dollars in order to create this vision. And within the community benefits, we've provided a lot of items. The ground floor retail, something we're very proud of. Ground floor retail is a difficult use to fill, but we believe it's important. We believe it's important for the building. It's a community benefit. So we've taken all of the various items, and on top of that, we've made a significant donation for affordable housing. So yes, I do think that $500,000 is a very respectable donation on top of and in conjunction with our very comprehensive community benefit package.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, all of you, for coming in and telling us about the development proposal. We'll now go on to our next delegation, Mr. Sheldon Atos. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can now speak.
Yes.
If I may I have my first slide? To address public amenity space, in the developer's updated community benefits proposal dated May 17, 2022, addressed to Mr. Schneider, it is important to note that the outdoor public amenity space mentioned is unchanged from the developer's initial proposal. The developer merely reiterates that the public outdoor plaza space is approximately 265 square meters. Statements such as may include public seating, landscape, and outdoor amenity features, may include superior surface treatments, mature street trees, public seating, landscape beds, and planters, etc., suggests to us a lack of commitment on the part of the developer to provide the public amenities shown in renderings and mentioned in text. We fear that the end result of this lack of commitment to public amenities will be the same result as at 1 Victoria, where much was promised and nothing was delivered. Slide, please. We quote again from the updated community benefits proposal. Quote, in addition to the public outdoor plaza, the owner intends to provide enhanced streetscapes along Victoria Street South and a portion of Park Street. While the use and design of the streetscape has not been finalized at this time, it may include superior surface treatments, mature street trees where possible, public seating, hardscape features, and enhanced landscape beds and planters, close quote. From this statement, a number of questions arise, such as, how can the developer enhance what is already a tree-lined street? Why is just a portion of Park Street enhanced? Is enhanced similar to the streetscape of the developments on Victoria Street to the east of this site? Further, the use of the words intends and may again suggests a lack of commitment to provide the noted amenities. Slide, please. The previously mentioned updated community benefits proposal states, quote, the proposed development provides for a broad range of both outdoor and indoor private amenity space for use by future residents, alleviating pressures on surrounding public amenity and recreational spaces. Quote, approximately 1,655 square meters of outdoor amenity space and, quote, approximately 1,455 square meters of indoor amenity space add up to approximately 3,110 square meters of amenity space to be shared by 1,124 units, or 277 square meters per unit. Using an average occupancy of 1.7 persons per unit, the amenity space allocation amounts to 1.63 square meters, not quite 18 square feet per person. Given this minuscule allocation of private amenity space, we find it difficult to believe that it will alleviate any pressure on surrounding public amenity and recreational spaces. We also wonder if any of this private amenity space is allocated for pets housed in this proposed development, or will that fall to Victoria Park? Slide, please. As for promised contributions towards local affordable housing, a quick summary of recent donations. 16 to 20 Queen Street North Momentum Developments, $500,000, 238 units, $2,100 per unit is their donation. 660 Belmont, Zaire Group, $250,000, 132 units. Their donation, $1,894 per unit. 30 Francis by Innate Developments, $600,000 divided by 532 units, $1,128 per unit. As Councillor Chapman previously mentioned, Park in Victoria, Dove Capital, $500,000, $1,124 units, comes out to $445 per unit. Based on the above information, to be equitable with other donations, we believe Dove's contribution should be between $1,267,000 and $2,360,000. Slide, please. Some quotes from the public and the press. Slide, please. New builds should fit in with the old. It's a request that city councils stick to the height levels set down in their own planning regulations so existing residential neighborhoods aren't overwhelmed by the sheer scale of new builds. The Records View, February 5th, 22. Kitchener must rethink core values. Why don't we collectively take greater care in defending the integrity of neighborhoods that have been built and lived in over decades? Records View, May 4, 2022. Slide, please. Larger builds lead to less livable cities. If generous upzoning and sparse application of urban design principles could solve our housing affordability crisis, Kitchener should lead in housing affordability. Investors smell upzoning like sharks smell blood in the water, with similar responses. Expectations for approval of high-density builds drive land prices too high for cheaper low-rise, high-density builds to be economically viable. Professor Don Parker, Special to Waterloo Region Record, February 22, 2022. Slide, please. Affordable condo options are needed. In this region, developers want the right to build their condos on some of the most sought-after real estate in Canada. In return for being granted this privilege, they should be sensitive to the community's need and willing to help meet them. The Records View, Waterloo Region Record, May 11, 2022. Slide, please. Headline was Mill Street Townhouse Project approved. Quote, with its proximity to the LRT, this purchase is a great opportunity for the proponent to work with the surrounding neighborhood to build a variety of housing products that build on the great tradition of this area. Mayor Verbanovic, in response to the announcement on the purchase of 1 acre of land at Benton and Church. Slide, please. 44 trees to be removed in stacked townhouse development. Councillor Scott Davey, who also lives in the neighborhood, said it's up to council to balance a reasonable level of intensification without disrupting communities. Slide, please. The city will incorporate existing and/or new trees into the streetscape or road right-of-way and encourage a new development or redevelopment to incorporate, protect, and conserve existing healthy trees. From the city's official plan, Section 8. Downtown should have green, pedestrian-friendly streets. The official plan, Section 15. Slide, please. All development in Kitchener should be designed as age and family friendly. Urban Design Manual, Citywide Design, City of Kitchener. Provide street trees along all streets. Urban Design Manual, Citywide Design, City of Kitchener. Slide, please. This is the final slide. Maintain a compatible interface between intensification areas and surrounding areas and achieve an appropriate transition of built form. That's the city's official plan, Section 3. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I don't see any questions, but I will ask you, based on your last slide, where you talk about transitions, what are you exactly getting at there?
In a number of regulations within the city's own official plan, I can quote, to ensure uses, built form and building design are compatible with surrounding low-rise neighborhoods and are pedestrian-oriented and human-scaled in order to positively contribute to the public realm. That's from the City of Kitchener official plan, Section 15, Objective 15.4.6, pages 1528. There are other quotations where this development is not complying with the City of Kitchener official plan, in my opinion.
Okay, one last question I wanted to ask you, and that is you spoke quite a bit about public amenities. What would you like to see changed from what's being proposed?
I would say more ground level green space that's available to the general public.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation and for taking the time to come in tonight. Next, we have Ms. Peggy Nichols. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Nichols.
Thank you. I'm just opening up my screen. Respected Chair and Council members, I'm speaking on behalf of the Victoria Park Neighbourhood Association's Development Committee in response to the updated benefits proposal regarding the development at the corner of Park and Victoria. Our Development Committee advocates for sustainable and livable development in and around Victoria Park with a focus on affordable housing, balancing green space with development, developing with climate change in mind, and community engagement in the development process. In our first response to this development proposal, we recommended at least the same number of affordable units as the number of households being displaced, the addition of 3-bedroom units, designated lands or cash in lieu for parkland to meet the rapidly growing need, and building materials and standards based on environmental sustainability. In the updated proposal, we were pleased to see the following: a commitment to 50 on-site affordable units based on the region's definition of affordable, which I'll get to later, the addition of an affordable housing contribution, the addition of 3-bedroom units, increased bike parking, some EV charging provisions for cars and bikes, designated car share parking spaces, and amenity space for neighborhood associations. And I just have a question about whether or not that's going to be free of charge, or if neighborhood associations are going to pay. We don't have a budget to pay for meeting space. We would like to acknowledge that most of these additions are ones we haven't seen at all or to the same extent in any of the other developments being proposed for downtown Kitchener, especially on-site affordable units and the inclusion of 3-bedroom units. And I just wanted to remark on how wonderful it is to hear the councillors asking questions about those kinds of things. I've attended a number of developer presentations recently, and I haven't heard those kinds of questions coming from council. So I am very happy to hear you asking those questions, and I hope you continue to ask them, because those are the questions citizens are asking too. We would like to share the following observations and recommendations. Affordability and housing for families. The region's target for affordable housing is for 30% of all new residential development between 2019 and 2041 to be affordable to low and moderate income households, with the maximum home ownership price of $368,000 being deemed affordable. The developer is currently committing to 5% affordable units, and only the studio or 1-bedroom units are available at the affordable price of $368,000. Our recommendation is that the developer make 10% of the units affordable, including a number of 2- and 3-bedroom units. Green space. Given the high rate of population increase in the downtown core, with more people living in high-rises with little to no green space, and the recent Spaces Report's recommendation to fund and create more parks, the need for development to contribute to green space has never been more urgent. Our recommendations are that the developer not be exempt from contributing to green space through cash in lieu and should be charged according to the rates in the Spaces Report, that the developer's commitment to enhance the streetscape along Victoria Street South and Park Street, as noted on page 2 of the updated proposal, include ensuring trees are planted to improve walkability and the pedestrian experience. And as Mr. Atos just recently pointed out, our concern is that wider sidewalks and trees are going to be lost to regional road widening. So that's something that has to be addressed, because right now there are no trees on Victoria Park or Victoria Street on that side of the street, and almost none on the opposite side. Building with climate change in mind. Given the city's recent 2019 declaration of a climate emergency, it is incumbent on all new developments to maximize ways of protecting the environment and minimizing their greenhouse gas emissions. There are 699 parking spaces proposed for this development, but only 9 will be immediately provisioned for charging electric vehicles, and only 135 will be designed to permit future installation of EV charging equipment. The government is mandating that by 2035, 100% of all new vehicles sold will be electric. The cost of EV charging stations will drop in the next few years. The cost of purchasing them in bulk will provide a significant cost savings, and there is a government rebate of up to at least $14,000 per charger, is my understanding. If the government is mandating only electric vehicles to fight climate change and is providing a rebate, developments must be mandated to provide the needed EV charging stations.
Can you summarize, please?
Yes. So our recommendations are that the owner provide EV charging stations for all resident parking spaces, that the owner provide additional bike parking spaces, up to 900 bike parking spaces, and that maximum efforts be made to construct all aspects of the building with climate change in mind, including energy sources, choices, and conservation, water conservation, rainwater runoff and heat mitigation, choice of building materials, bird die-off from collisions with all tall buildings. And we appreciate the opportunity to present our comments and welcome your questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I see you've got a question from Councillor Davey.
Yes.
Hi, Ms. Nichols. Thank you for taking the time. And I just want to say, I think all of council wants to see many of the things in every development that you mentioned, but I have to ask if you have an idea of the cost of these things that you're asking for, like the quantum. Do you have an idea how much these things might cost?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But I do know the cost to the environment and to citizens if more of these kinds of things aren't provided.
Right. And again, I agree largely, but I mean, I guess I'd have to ask you if you think it's fair. I'll just pick one out of the things that you mentioned, the parkland fees, right? I have to go back and double check, but I believe it would be capped at something like $12,000 parkland fees, which on this development would be in the range of $13 million to the developer last minute. If you were, if the city did that to you, if you're building a pool in your backyard and you already paid a non-refundable fee for your pool, and then when they're about to put it in, the city came along and said, oh, guess what? Your building permit is now, $6,000 instead of $0. How do you think that's a fair approach to how we put these things through?
You're absolutely right. It's a huge amount of money, and it's being asked when those fees were not in place. But I feel that is the responsibility of council and the planners that those fees are not in place, and that we are now short of funding for parkland, and we are very short of parkland to meet the growing needs in downtown Kitchener. So I would challenge the council to have staff to go back and meet with the developer and try and figure out something that will be fair, so that we're not just providing amenities in the building for the people that live there. And it's not enough. Those people, I'm sure, will appreciate that opportunity to use those amenities within the building, but it's definitely not going to be enough for them. And we're adding at least 1,800 new residents. And I think that's a conservative estimate with this building. So I think that it's only fair. And I think that all of the developments in downtown Kitchener need to be contributing to parkland.
Yeah, thank you. And we definitely agree that the parkland backlog is definitely the responsibility, and I'll even say the fault of council historically and staff, and we have to look to rectify that, which we will be doing soon. But thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't see any other questions, but I had a question for you. So you're part of the Victoria Park Neighborhood Association.
Yes.
And, when we think about parkland, this development is like a block away from Victoria Park. So does that not satisfy the needs of the project?
Thank you for that question. And I did actually present at the Spaces in response to the Spaces report last week. And I shared a slide that I took just a couple of weeks ago of Victoria Park on a Sunday afternoon, and it was packed. And I'm glad to see the park be so well used, but to me it was a message that we need more space, not just for the people who are already living here, but for the thousands of people that like council is approving development after development in the downtown, and that's thousands and thousands more people if anybody used the Iron Horse Trail during the pandemic, it also was packed and sometimes unsafe with cyclists and pedestrians and people with children and dogs and that type of thing. If we're going to grow our city, then we have a responsibility to make sure that we provide the amenities for the thousands of new people that are wanting to come and enjoy, you know, the space that we have. So we just need to find a way to provide more green space because it's not enough for the people who are already here.
So you were at the Spaces report and
Yes.
delegated. At that meeting, there was talk about the privately owned, I hope I got this right, privately owned publicly accessible spaces, the POPs. Do you see this as something that could be negotiated into this build?
I think, you know, I think that POPs are definitely a very nice feature for the people who live in the building. I think what was being recommended by some of the councillors, and I think maybe some of the developers at that meeting, was that those should be, there should be a discount to developers for making those spaces available to the public. I really don't think that that's very, I don't think that's very feasible. Because I don't think that the public would, most people are not going to feel comfortable walking into someone else's building, taking the elevator up and sitting on the benches among people, you know, who are residents of the building, and these people are not. I think you would almost always feel like an interloper, even if you were a very bold, you know, self-confident person whose income is decent and whose education is great. And I just can't imagine general, even I wouldn't have the nerve to do something like that. So it's a lovely asset for the people that live in the building. And there's no question that there'll be people that'll be using that barbecue space and using that place maybe to, you know, to sit outside if they don't want to stretch their legs more than that. But I don't think that it in any way makes up for public parkland. And I hope that people in apartment buildings will come out and mingle, because that's, as a neighborhood association, that's one of the things that we have the most difficulty with, is how do we connect with our neighbors in apartment buildings? It's like the Great Divide. So public parks are actually a really good place for us to try and start connecting.
Okay, thank you very much for coming and speaking to us today and for your comments.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Next we have Margaret Walton Roberts. When you're ready, go ahead.
Great, thank you, Councillor Chair Deb Chapman and Council for this opportunity. I'm presenting on behalf of Liverpool Park and Victoria, and I request permission to speak beyond the 5 minutes. We have a series of slides, and we also conducted a community survey, and we want to share some of those results with you. So Liverpool Park and Victoria values intensification, but we value it equally with other policy priorities. Next slide, please. We had a number of concerns, and we did have a meeting with Dove Capital, which we were very grateful for, and we're interested in many of the changes that have been made in their proposal. But we're very concerned about compatibility with surrounding neighbourhoods, about the inviting streetscape, about Park Street as a green corridor to Victoria Park, and about affordable housing for diverse households. Next slide, please. Park and Victoria, this development is located on the edge of the urban growth centre. It's within a mixed-use corridor. It's currently zoned for low and medium intensity mixed use, and it's part of Cherry Park neighbourhood, and it's across the street from Victoria Park neighbourhood. Next slide, please. Our survey that we conducted with residents received 75 responses, and the majority of the respondents are in this neighbourhood. And so those survey results we will share as we go through the slides. But I just wanted to let you know that the responses are from people in this affected neighbourhoods. Next slide, please. We're very keen on the idea of design for transition, which is a key part of creating compatible tall building fabric. And this should be able to create harmonious relationships between tall buildings and their surroundings. And they should be sensitively transitioned to surrounding urban context, accounting for both existing context and planned vision for the area. And this is taken from the City of Kitchener's Urban Design Manual, Designed for Tall Buildings. The proposed development does not appear to us to be transitioning. It's actually increasing height as you move away from the downtown core. Next slide, please. Also, tall buildings should not interrupt or impose upon the existing or planned neighbourhood character or the public realm. And that's again from the City of Kitchener's Design Urban Manual, Designed for Tall Buildings. And the shadow studies of this particular development, which we've not discussed, will cast significant shadows over the Victoria Park neighbourhood community surrounding it. Next slide, please. Our community survey indicated that in terms of shadow impacts, over 50% of the respondents said that shadow were either a great or of moderate concern for them. Next slide, please. We're also interested in the idea of a mixed-use corridor, and that new development should maximize development opportunities yet be compatible with surrounding land use and built form. And the city's guideline for Victoria Street South corridor, we're concerned that the ideas of streetscape integration and making it a livable space and a human scale space is not necessarily being maximized. And we want to see a strong visual connection to Victoria Park, and we want to create a green corridor along Park Street. And we're concerned that this is not being achieved. Next slide, please. We have looked at a number of very appealing mid-rise, and we're concerned that not more of these mid-rise intensification opportunities are being engaged with. These are mid-scale with step design. They have street trees and soft landscaping. Next slide, please. And here's another one from 144 Park Street, which has a high rise with townhouses on the lower level. It includes trees and soft landscaping. Next slide, please. In terms of this particular development, when we asked in our survey about the height of the development, over 50% of the respondents felt it was much too high. 8% said it was too high. Next slide, please. We're interested in opportunities for effective setback. We'd like to see more grass buffer to the street. We want to see trees and benches and meridian. And so we're very interested in the suggestions that have been offered for improving streetscape, and we want to see those delivered. Next slide, please. And here we're again coming from the Park and Iron Horse example in Waterloo. You can see again a significant setback, grass buffer to the street, trees, public space and on the ground floor, and landscape features. Next slide, please. And here on Park and Union, large setback and mature trees in place. Next slide, please. Here's another example from Park Street where we do again have low rise, large setback, and these are family larger units as well that are available for all types of residents. Next slide, please. This is a picture of Park Street where the development is planned, and you can see all of these mature trees. I do not believe any of them will be preserved. They'll all be removed. And we're concerned about this because we want to improve the pedestrian experience on the street. Next slide, please. When we asked about the developer's proposal and how that will require removal of the trees, we found that respondents of the 75 people who responded, 81% of people wanted Park Street to be tree lined. 53% wanted the building to be set back to allow for mature trees to be saved. 28% would like to see new trees planted to replace the trees that are removed. And so we would appreciate greater attention to the streetscape. Next slide, please. In terms of learning from experiences, residents in these neighbourhoods have been here before, and as one of the previous delegates mentioned, the promises made for One Victoria, which we can see in the top renditioning, did not come to fruition. What we received, what we ended up with is a corner that is incredibly windswept. In the wintertime when you're walking there, there is no protection. It's a very dehumanizing type of landscape, and we want to avoid creating more of that. We want to actually build more appealing streetscapes where people will enjoy being present. Next slide, please. We also want to be aware of pedestrian comfort in terms of wind channeling effects that would be happening along Victoria as more and more high-rises are built along here. Next slide, please. Generally, we're interested in a livable development that values intensification, because we do value intensification. We recognise the need for it. We want it to be equally valued with other official plans and priorities such as neighbourhood context and compatibility, the mix of building types and sizes, the urban forest and the conservation of trees. As other delegates have already discussed, this is highly important as we move to a climate resilient future. And we want to see age and family friendly development. Next slide, please.
Are you almost finished? Do you want to start summarizing?
Yeah, just a few more slides. We're pleased to know that there will be some consideration for other housing unit sizes. Next slide, please. We're concerned still about speculative investment, and especially mostly one bedroom. So we do have concern about how much is contributed to social housing, and we're pleased about some of the agendas that were offered. Next slide, please. Indeed, many on our survey said they would be interested in having a purpose-built rental housing, and we had discussions with Dove Capital Initial about having a whole tower be purpose-built rental, and survey responses are supportive of this. Next slide, please. So our visions are for a livable, compatible and inviting development that's transitional in scale between low and high, a comfortable microclimate at street level. We want to have some consideration of what's happening with the shadow studies. We want Park Street to remain tree-lined and for Victoria Street to become tree-lined, and housing for a wide range of household sizes. Next slide, please.
Okay, you're going to have to...
Yeah, we go. This is the last one.
Okay.
This is the last one. And then we also want to just say about predictable intensification, but the final slide is the records view. In this region, developers want the right to build their condos and so on. And this is something that Sheldon had already presented in other delegates. So I can leave it there, but I will just say we want to see predictable intensification as residents of this community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. I see there's a question from Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Chapman, and thanks, Margaret, for coming in. Can you tell me how many members are in your group?
You're on mute.
So Livable Park and Victoria is a combination of the Cherry Park neighbourhood and the Victoria Park neighbourhood, and so we have anywhere from 6 to 8, I think, members, and we've had a number of events. We had a community summit for the Places and Spaces report. We have various meetings to discuss this. We've met with planners. We met with Dove Capital to discuss the proposed development, and we, as we said, we conducted this survey, which we received 75 responses to.
Okay, and back to the survey, where do we have access to this survey so that council or committee can see what type of questions were asked?
Yeah, we can make that access available to you. We conducted the survey as a community group, to be honest, because we didn't feel that there was enough community consultation. This development is a significant development. There's a lot of excitement about it, and we see a lot of really good things about it. So we want to push to have a more considerate engagement with local citizens. If you look at this site, it's on Victoria and Park. The only sign that was put up about this development was a rather small sign in front of a house on Park Street. There was never a substantial sign placed on the corner of Victoria and Park. And so we felt public engagement was diminished by that lack of publicization about the development. And so we conducted a survey in order to get feedback from residents who we felt had maybe not been aware of what was going on under the manner in which information was being provided by the city in the development process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question. I just have one last question. You mentioned that you had spoken to the developer and city staff. So is the developer aware of the results of your findings and city staff as well, or is this the first time it comes to be presented?
As far as I know, this is the first time it's been presented because the survey was only completed a week or two ago.
Okay, so yeah, if you could share it with us, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you very much for coming in. So we have one more delegation, and that's Ms. Shirley Gosselin. Go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, we're set up. Madam Chair, members of the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee and city staff. I thank you for this opportunity to speak to you regarding my concerns and those of our neighborhood about the proposed project at the corner of Park and Victoria under review tonight. I oppose this development on many levels, but primarily because it does not fit into the official plan for Kitchener. And having read the proposal and the staff recommendations, I still do not see any compelling reason to allow this exception. On multiple occasions, the city in the staff report, they refer to these subject lands as being part of the City of Kitchener's Urban Growth Center. Yet I wish to present 3 different maps prepared by the city which contradict this statement. The map in front of you right now is from the Downtown Kitchener Action Plan. Please note the irregular corner that excludes the property in subject. It's not continued part of that, this property in question. Next map, please. This is the map of the Urban Growth Center. The little red line has moved in the last year, but you can see the subject property is a different color than the rest of the Urban Growth Center for a reason. Next map, please. This one, I wish I could blow it up, but if you, expand it. If you would look at the number 1, this is the planning development zones. And if you look at the number 1, which is the city commercial core, you would also notice that it isn't a straight line right in that corner. It is excluding the properties we are discussing. There are other maps that the city has produced that show the same point, but these 3 should be enough. This exclusion is not accidental. It was very deliberate and well thought out. The Kitchener's official plan was created over several years of discussions and consultations and carefully crafted to balance the need for intensification in the inner core to protect our valuable farmlands and our water table, and the need to protect our established downtown residential neighborhoods and the character of our city. It was decided at that time to restrict the high-density developments to certain streets only and portions thereof. It was also decided that it was necessary to include transition zones between the high-density areas and the lower-density areas, so as not to devalue and destroy the people's right and ability to enjoy their own properties. This corner in question is a very busy and hazardous intersection already. The official plan did not want a high-density development at this corner, which would make the problem considerably worse. If you talk to people who live at this intersection, they would tell you that there are accidents there often. My own husband was struck by a car making a left-hand turn and not being attentive to pedestrians. This proposed development with 1,124 units would send at least 1,200 more cars, bikes, and pedestrians through this intersection every day, mostly at rush hour, and many of them making left-hand turns. The area in discussion was deliberately designated a transition zone and limited to low and medium density development. This was not an oversight or an accident of planning. The proposed development goes completely against the vision and reasoning for the existence of this zone. By its own surveys, the city has already met its intensification targets for 2030 with the projects already built or in progress. So the need for more intensification is not relevant. It is true there is a lack of affordable housing in the city at this time, but none of the units proposed in this project will help in this matter. The greatest need in the city for housing is not one-bedroom units, but for family-size units to raise families in. As well, this proposal evicts a number of tenants, many of whom are on disability pensions, and none of whom will be able to afford to buy a condo, even if it's priced more affordably. This proposal also evicts numerous small businesses and craftspeople who have worked in this current property for many years, all of which will not be accommodated in the proposal at hand, both because they have allotted very little space to businesses and because the cost of that little space available they can't afford it. This developer purposely bought up land that was zoned and priced for low and medium density development, engaging in blockbusting, and is now trying to get city council to turn these properties into high density property, which will be worth 10 to 100 times what they paid for it. They don't need to build anything on this property, and they will have made millions in profits. I would regard it as a betrayal of the purpose of the planning department of the city of Kitchener and the city's citizens of this city to allow this proposal to go forward, to break our official plan and our zoning bylaws, to enrich a private developer, and with wanton disregard for the safety and well-being of the neighborhood, would destroy all credibility for city council in the eyes of the people just before our municipal elections.
Can you please summarize?
It would set a very dangerous precedent, and all other developers would demand similar concessions, making a mockery of planning in our city. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Any questions? I have a question. I'm a bit interested to hear more about the UGC maps that you showed, and you refer to that corner as a transition zone. So where does it where does city documents identify that as a transition zone, or are those your words?
The very fact that, when we talked about the official plan, when we were building it, we talked about that. But also the very fact that it is zoned MU1, which is low density, and MU2, which is medium density, was on purpose to create this transition.
Okay, and you're arguing that that would be more amenable to the surrounding low density neighborhood?
Yes,
okay.
I mean, MU2 will allow up to 8 stories, and that is plenty. And yeah, it's just extreme. It's taking property that's zoned for 2 to 4 stories, and they're going up to 38 stories. This is an extreme change in the zoning.
Right.
You're not adding like, another point of the floor space ratio. They're going from floor space ratios of 2 and 4 to 11.4. For what? The space that they say they're going to provide, I couldn't run a single program out of that time allotment and space. So it's not a very valuable community meeting space area.
Okay, thank you very much for coming in and thank you for your comments. So now we'll go, that's the end of the delegations. So now we'll go to questions for staff.
Through you, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
My apologies. We did have one more delegation, Miss Penny. And
Okay.
I believe she's on the call.
Okay, sorry, it might be in my, sorry, it is on my sheets. Go ahead, Penny, when you're ready.
Hi, thank you. I'll keep it kind of short.
We can't hear you. I mean, we can hear you very faintly.
Can you hear me now?
No.
How about now?
Very faintly.
I don't know, that's as high as it will go.
Does staff have any suggestions?
Through you, Madam Chair, I wonder if there might be any headphones connected to your setup, or anything that you might be able to unplug. Would you have headphones available to connect?
No, it's just not working. Sorry, it won't work.
Would you like to try phoning in on your phone?
No, that's okay. The only question I really had was transportation. That's it. Just why are we?
Here, Penny noted her question related to transportation.
Can't hear. Sorry, can't hear anything. But Penny, you and I spoke earlier, so I will inquire with staff. I'll ask questions about the transportation study. So sorry that this isn't working, but thank you for coming.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I might suggest, we will reach out to Penny and have her attend the council meeting on the 20th to express any views. And we will touch base with her in the meantime to make sure that she's able to participate fully in that meeting.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, so sorry for thinking we were finished, but we are now finished. So I'd like to ask if there are any questions for staff. I think it was first Councillor Johnston. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Chapman. And I'm wondering if staff can remind us of the current and planned density in the area between Park Street and King Street on Victoria Street.
Thanks for the question. Through the chair, from Park Street to King Street, it would be all within the urban growth center. The entire area would be urban growth center, and there are a number of different zoning categories and official plan designations. There is the warehouse zone, obviously, which is the innovation district. As you get closer to Victoria and King, the Garment Street condos north of the site would be a high density zoning bylaw amendment that was done maybe 5 years ago. And there would be a mix of other UGC uses, but it would all be within the urban growth center.
Thanks, Mr. Schneider. I think, and I might have phrased my question incorrectly, but I'm wondering, in terms of the amount of people that we're kind of expecting in that area, and that might be hard to speculate on, but I know there's a lot of things under construction or just newly constructed there right now.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Through the chair, the Urban Growth Center is the portion of town that we expect the most significant population growth.
Okay. And I'm wondering if we can have staff comment on the current traffic volumes for Park Street and Jubilee Drive, as well as the volumes that are expected or allowed on Victoria Street right now.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Through the chair, a transportation impact study was provided by the applicant. Mrs. Erica Bailey is here and can speak further to the details. But our transportation planning staff reviewed it in regards to the Park Street entrance and the current traffic volumes and what the predicted impact of this development would produce. And our transportation staff was satisfied with that. In addition, the transportation impact study was evaluated and reviewed by regional transportation planning staff because of course Victoria Street is a regional road. And again, regional transportation staff did not have any recommendations for remedial actions, and they were satisfied with what was produced in the report.
So in terms of no remedial actions along there, so there's nothing planned perhaps even for cycling amenities, like there's barely any boulevard at all on Park Street now. So I'm wondering if there's any plans or anything for Park Street and then continuing along Park Street to Jubilee there.
Through the chair, council may recall approval of the extension of a multi-use path along Joseph Street and then along Stewart Street, which connects to the Iron Horse Trail and to the downtown grid. And through the future phases of development within the Bromlands, there will be additional connections within there to get cyclists to those main key cycling arteries.
If I recall correctly, I think that is where on Park Street there, that's where the green paint is for the cyclists to be in the middle of the road there. Is that correct, Mr. Reedman?
Through the chair, not entirely correct. And so there will be a crossing of the rail corridor. There's a spur line crossing and there's a parking garage that's being constructed in between the main rail corridor and the spur line. And then, so the main connection would actually avoid Park Street and Victoria Street altogether and provide that safe connection along the trail that runs through Cherry Park, ultimately to the Iron Horse Trail, and then down Joseph Street towards the downtown.
So we're hoping then that people will not maybe be using that as much for cycling and that they would be using then the trails more. Is that correct?
Yes, through the chair, that was the intent of the planning for the grid, is to make a safe for all ages and ability connection around that area that avoids using the busy arterial streets.
Okay, thank you. I will have comments later. Chair Chapman, thanks.
Thank you for your questions. Councillor Ioannidis, you put your hand down?
Yes, just because I think Councillor Johnson kind of asked the question with regards to transportation, but I'm still not really satisfied with that answer that I was given. But
okay, thank you. Councillor Davey, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of questions actually following up from I think it was Mr. Atos's presentation of staff. He highlighted a lot of areas where in the application they did use words like may and I don't know, will attempt to or whatever. What, in your experience, Mr. Schneider, how often does what we see here end up translating to reality by the time things get built? And what, if any, teeth do we have? Because I know it's more of a site plan thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. So through the chair, I think the intent of why they were using those words is because they don't want to assume that approval is granted at this meeting. Obviously, it still needs to be voted on. But if approved, we would then proceed to the site plan stage where those greater details about landscaping and streetscapes are addressed. And I think the may and the intend to is that a lot of the times we as urban planners have the best intentions to have street trees and infrastructure and green streetscapes, but we do run into challenges with utilities. And Park Street has overhead hydro wires that would essentially not make you be able to put trees of any significant height underneath them. And that's coming from hydro, and it's coming from our folks that operate the snow plows, et cetera. There has to be a certain viable area for utilities and for servicing. So if approved today, I will certainly endeavor to work with our operations staff, with our engineering staff and our transportation staff and the applicant to see if we can get the best possible scenario. They've given examples like One Victoria where that didn't exactly happen, but we're looking at other things like lower planter boxes that have low level shrubs and vegetation to at least provide some greenery on the streets where maybe taller trees would not be viable.
Thank you. I appreciate that context. Mr. Stevenson.
Through the chair, just to supplement Mr. Schneider's answer, in this particular case, we are getting a road widening dedication, and we know that the way we build roads and the right of way is not all dedicated to vehicle traffic only. So we're seeing when we're reconstructing roads, we're doing road diets, we're reconstructing our roads downtown to use more of the right of way for pedestrians. As we continue to evolve what our cross sections look like, with the additional land, that's a greater opportunity to have those streetscape elements. So they talked about, I heard the delegate earlier talk about may have sidewalks, may have street furniture. That's because those details that we're going to require, and we have the ability to require those details through our streetscape and our design policies and our official plan. We have not come to a determination on that. Planning and operations are continuing to look closely at redefining what those cross sections look like. So we do have conflicts like overhead utilities, where we may be able to either offset utilities or street trees within the widened right of way. So we continue to develop new standards. We are also disappointed with some of the outcomes that we had within some of our tighter right of ways, where we had to have the LRT and maintain vehicle movement through the road. So One Victoria and Kaufman Lofts, perfect example. We have a greater opportunity here because we'll have a greater road widening after we get the land dedication.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. I see we're running out of time. I'll just burn through this next one really quickly. I'm looking for staff's response also in a similar vein to the 13 3-bedroom units versus 30, and what history we have in situations like this, and is it entirely up to the developer in the end to determine whether it is 13? Because I'm just trying to understand why 30 really even frankly means anything to us at this point.
Thank you. And through the chair, right now in our zoning bylaw, we don't regulate the number of bedrooms. So it's really a conversation that we have with the community based on what they feel is needed. But it's also a conversation with the applicant on what they can market, what they can sell, and what they can build and develop. I think it's a great opportunity to get 13 3-bedroom units, as the original proposal had 0. But again, the additional 17 units, adding a 2-bedroom unit and a 1-bedroom, I'm personally unfamiliar with that. It would be kind of uncharted territory. But if that is the case, I'm certain that our staff would be willing to work with the applicant to create more 3-bedroom units if possible.
Thank you. I see my time's up, Madam Chair. I do have more questions, but so I'll queue back in.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Chapman. Again, I'm trying to figure out the opinion of the region with regards to the road widening. And I know Mr. Garrett, you had mentioned some land being taken for widening, but or for street level, trees and stuff. But I'm looking at page 231 in our package, and it's saying that it says that it's telling me that there's some form of dedication that's going to be requiring for road widening, and so that's why I'm trying to figure this out. What's really going on here?
So through the chair, the region's official plan and our official plan has designated road widths for regional roads and other streets. And when certain type of development applications come in, such as an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, it gives the region the opportunity to take that land, to require the applicant to convey to them land in order to meet the designated road width of Victoria Street, which is something like 72 feet. It's very wide, the ultimate width. So on the subject lands, it's approximately 10 feet at the corner that's being taken, but it does sliver down as it already has been taken as you get closer to Brand Street. So again, Mr. Stevenson mentioned that it's important to note that the designated road widths do not just solely incorporate the traveled portion of the road. They would be cycling lanes, sidewalks, areas for street trees as well. So that's the total road width. I hope that helps, but if you need any other explanation, let me know.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing some kind of plan to see exactly how that's going to entail, because quite honestly, I'm having a hard time visualizing how that intersection would look with those recommendations.
Yep, certainly through the chair, we can pull up a plan. I know the applicant and their architecture firm have the plans up as well. But if you just give me a moment, I can pull up a plan to demonstrate that.
Madam Chair, may I just a point of clarification while my colleague is pulling that up. When we talk about the land dedication widening, that is widening the amount of right-of-way that the region and the city would own, but not necessarily physically moving the curb, widening the road, or changing any of the sidewalk configuration. So at this time, in cases where we receive a road widening land dedication through the site plan approval process and through the landscape review, that's where we would actually review what site elements like planting and street furniture could be implemented within that space now. There's no plans as part of this development application to change the curb line or the physical width of the road.
Okay, I'm still not really happy with that answer, and I'm still trying to look through the report to see whether or not what were the complete details of that traffic study.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah, sorry, just one moment. I don't think I have the ability to share my screen. I think it has to be the clerk. But back to your other question in terms of the transportation impact study. So our transportation staff provided comments to planning saying that they have reviewed the transportation impact study based on the current volumes and what's proposed for this site. They look at how many cars would exit in the peak AM periods and the peak PM periods and determine, given established thresholds, whether that's an acceptable level of traffic. So one thing that this development has going for it in terms of traffic is that it's intending to be a transit-oriented development. And if they were not seeking a reduction in vehicle parking, they would be required to provide one space per unit, 1,124 parking spaces. And of course, we know that that would generate a lot more traffic and a lot more trips. So they're relying on people to live here and not own a vehicle because there's far less parking spaces, 699, than there are dwelling units. So I think one of the main aspects of their transportation impact study was the TDM measures that they're proposing, which are car share spaces, EV spaces, secure bike storage spaces for electric vehicle bikes as well. So there's a whole range of TDM measures that they look to implement in order to seek the demand for vehicle parking, and any reduction in vehicle parking will reduce traffic demands as well.
Okay, well, no doubt that this is definitely in a transit-oriented situation. I still do have some concerns, and I really would like to see that report. And because I'm having a hard time making my decision without having that information. And I travel that road all the time, and I know how difficult it is. And when I consider the other developments that are being proposed within that neighborhood, I have a bit of a trouble with this. And normally I would totally agree with what the transportation staff would have proposed, but I'm not sure even if half the people in have the transportation. I still feel like that's quite a bit of cars. And any other regional road, you always see you know, the enter and exit to be a little further away from the regional road. And this to me is just right on the corner. Doesn't really, and if there's no another additional lane, I'm not sure how this is going to work. And so that's why I want to see these plans before I really give a complete, full assessment of this proposal.
Did you have any other questions? No? Okay, Councillor Davey, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Just following up on the last part, just one clarifying question. There are no 2-bedroom plus den units in this proposal, correct?
The chair, that's correct.
Okay. So my final question I want to touch upon a bit was also brought up with Mr. Atos, and I was curious about the total other contribution. In terms of the affordable units, I know they might get a bit of a break from our DCs. Are you aware, Mr. Schneider, of any other benefits, write-offs, rebates, whatever they might get from any other level of government for each affordable unit?
No, through the chair, I'm not aware of any other rebates or subsidies. I believe they're doing this as a proposal to supplement this development application.
Okay, so, and again, if I recall correctly, the affordable amount that's been established is $368,000. Okay. Yeah. Do you have any idea? I can speculate, but do we have any idea what the going rate is for a bachelor / 1-bedroom of this type in this location right now in the city of Kitchener?
Through the chair, unfortunately, I don't have that information. In planning, we don't often look into those values, so I wouldn't want to hazard a guess. And market prices are changing with volatility.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I will speak to it in my comments. I don't see anyone else. Thank you, Madam Chair. I will move it and I'll have comment as well.
Okay, I do have some questions before we get into the comments, but I note you're moving. So my questions have to do, first of all, the traffic study. When was it done?
Through the chair, I believe the traffic study was done in 2020.
So during the peak of COVID.
Again, we can have Mrs. Bailey speak further to it as she's more intimately familiar with it, but I believe it was 2020.
Would you like me to comment?
Yes, please.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So looking at, we've been dealing with traffic data through COVID. We've had this question many times through the pandemic, and we used data, we used historical data and factored it, and this was supported by the city and the region. And so we have data from 2019, and then we collected data in November 2020, which was some restrictions had been lifted at that time, and factored our data accordingly. And this was, as I said, this was supported by the review agencies.
And this was way before the termination of the Garment Street building and the glove box, and I guess primarily those two developments, right?
I'm not sure how that timing is reflected against our data, unfortunately.
Yeah. Maybe Mr. Schneider, can you speak to that?
Through the chair, it's my understanding that those Garment Street buildings are still being fitted out and occupancy is still being granted. So I don't think they're at full build out. No, I think you'd be correct there.
We did, just on to add to that, we included in our background forecasts for surrounding developments. And so if it wasn't fully built out, we included quite a number of surrounding developments and included those in our forecast work.
Okay, I'm not quite sure what that means, but okay, I believe you.
It means we, if the traffic didn't already exist, we forecasted it to be included in the future years. And so it is, so our ultimate build out horizon would include all the traffic, not only for this development, but the surrounding ones as well, to get a picture of the entire neighborhood and the impact of all the developments.
Okay, so when I, I've asked this question many times with different developments about traffic studies. And I understand that this traffic study went from the corner of Park and Victoria, Victoria and Bram, Victoria and Joseph, and ended at Victoria and King. Was there anything done? Was there anything in the study that covered the area from Park all the way to Belmont, where the road narrows, and where, you know, that is really one of the big problems as far as the bottleneck at that intersection of Park and Victoria?
It was not identified in our scope. We reviewed the operations of the intersections along Victoria Street, but nothing further along Park Street was identified in the study area, and that was at the guidance of the city and the region.
So is that something, maybe I'll turn to staff on this for a moment, is that something we can request? You know, to get a more wholesome overview of traffic in that area?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the terms of reference for the traffic study have been determined. Before we accept a transportation impact assessment, the region and the city and the applicant agree to terms of reference where what the parameters of studies are required are outlined. So our transportation staff will identify intersections that need further study. As Ms. Bailey had mentioned, we provide anticipated or expected additional dwelling units that are either in application, under review, or under construction, so that those numbers can be projected. We also require through, as part of that TIS assessment, the what analysis needs to be completed. When we receive that TIS, our transportation staff review that. The Region of Waterloo transportation staff review that, and if further information is required, they identify it at that point before an application is brought before council. Certainly, I can't speak for my colleagues in transportation. However, based on their summary comments, they've indicated to Mr. Schneider that they are satisfied with the recommendations from the TIS. So at this point, it wouldn't be my recommendation to have the TIS expanded.
Sorry, I'll pass it over to you, Councillor Johnston, and then I have some more questions.
Thank you, Chair Chapman. And actually, I just, I concur with exactly what you just said about expanding that area to include coming from Belmont. We've just approved another building at 660 Belmont, which is going to increase traffic along there. And Park Street, Glasgow to Park Street is a major thoroughfare to get from the west side of the city down into the downtown, and it's quite often backed up. And I spend a lot of quality time underneath that railroad bridge when I'm waiting at a stoplight. So it's at least all the way back to there, and sometimes back up to Swanson's Home Hardware now. So if we can expand that, I don't know what we need to do to ask for that, Chair Chapman. I mean, you already have, but if we can expand that area, and I would also say into the park, as I was mentioning before as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comment. Councillor Ioannidis, did you have another question? No, okay. I also had a question about the mature tree, or the idea of putting greenery along, well, both Park and Victoria, when the setbacks are 0 meters. So how could you possibly have room for planters or trees or anything for that matter?
Through the chair, the road widening and the existing sidewalk widths would be the areas that would be projected to have greenery. With a 0 meter setback, yes, you're right, there wouldn't be space on site for greenery, but the proposal is to include that within the right-of-way areas, the sidewalks.
But if you're widening the road, are you not losing sidewalk at the same time?
Yeah, so again, through the chair, the road widening does not mean that they are expanding the traveled portion of the road. It means that they're taking part of private property, expropriating it and turning it into regional or city ownership, to include the full width of the road, which includes the curbs, the gutters, the sidewalks, and any street trees that would, or cycling lanes that would be within that area as well.
Okay, but the lush trees along Park Street, you're definitely going to lose them all and not be replacing them. And I think you've already spoken to that, so you don't have to go over it again. My other question has to do with the UGC area. So I know Ms. Gosselin showed us a few maps, and I don't even know how to make this electronic, but we were given this in 2019, and this was based on the Crosby and what the UGC area would be. And as you can see at that bottom corner down here, it does not include the corner of Park and Victoria. So this is not an old map. It was a map that we were given as Crosby, and I realized Crosby was not passed in the UGC and the MST areas. But again, I mean, there's a confusion both with the residents, and I have confusion myself about what this corner actually, where it actually falls in the zoning bylaws. And so maybe you can give me greater clarification on that. And I think all of council received this. You may recall this map. I mean, it's a very useful map.
Thank you. Through the chair, I believe that the regional official plan and the city's official plan, along with Crosby, had a few iterations of where the UGC would be. But ultimately, the province decides the boundaries of the urban growth center, and they have made that decision, and this is where the urban growth center now lays.
And when was that done? And could you share that document with us?
Through the chair, I'd have to ask my colleague, Mr. Stevenson, for some assistance on that, but I believe he's got the background.
Okay, that would be helpful. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Stevenson.
Yes, so the province of Ontario through the growth plan has identified boundaries for the urban growth center. So we received that information from the province, and that delineates where our downtown is. And that's the area in which we have to anticipate and plan for the greatest amount of growth.
Okay, so if you could just send us, when that was done and how it was done, that would be very helpful. The other question I had to do was to do it, and I apologize for taking so much time on this, but has to do with the transitions. And so it was pointed out by one of the delegations that you tend to go from high density, high height, many stories, and as you come down into a residential area, you lower that to make that transition more compatible with the neighboring community. And we're right beside, and I realized that the Victoria Park Heritage District is behind the houses on Victoria Street, but nonetheless, it's within an earshot of a heritage district. And so I'm very puzzled at how we see this lack of transition acceptable.
Okay, thank you for the question. Through the chair, in my staff report, I did share some maps of the Victoria Street neighborhood plan and the Victoria Park neighborhood plan, as there is a different secondary plan on each side of Victoria Street. And they show the land use designations as being mixed use in all of the surrounding and abutting areas. So this site being within the UGC, those secondary plans did think about transition, and they did zone the land surrounding it mixed use. So there are no low-rise residential zoned properties or designated properties that directly abut the site. Some of them do have maybe 2 or 3 story duplexes and singles on them now, but the zoning allows for up to 4 stories. And again, we consider low rise to be 3 stories or less. So the site itself does not directly abut any low rise residential areas. We do acknowledge it is close to the Heritage District, and our heritage planners certainly reviewed this application and were satisfied with what's being proposed. So in terms of transition, you do have the other side of Victoria Street is all zoned mixed use. It's an area in transition. There's certainly other development applications going on in those mixed use areas. But again, planning staff feels that the transition that's being proposed now, with no abutting low-rise residential lands and the 4 to 6 story podium, is providing adequate transition.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Councillor Davey, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm in comments when we get there.
Okay, we need a mover. You moved it already, so go ahead with comments.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to start with the positives of this proposal. Number one, thank you, Mr. Schneider, for your work in this file. You did a great job. I would also say that, you know, again, this is beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but I think it's quite an attractive building. I really like the design. I think it will add nicely to this community. I do have some concerns with, I still have some concerns the number of 3-bedroom units. When we are looking at well over 1,000 units, I think 13 is a little on the light side. And while I do intend to support it this time, I guess I would strongly urge the applicant to take a hard look at that number between now and council to see if there is wiggle room in terms of that base number of 13, because frankly, the 30 doesn't really mean much to me when it's not guaranteed. The last thing I wanted to touch upon is the contribution to affordable housing, the affordable units as a whole. I think it's really important we don't get confused on what the applicant here is really truly contributing. Mr. Atos mentioned the $500,000 contribution, and that's great. And then he brought up a few other developments that we have seen lately that had 0 affordable units in the build, and they made a contribution as well. It's really, really important to remember that when they're talking about 50 units at $368,000, that they could, and a quick look at the market tells me it's the going rate for these is $450,000 to $500,000 that they could get if they had 0 affordable units like everyone else. That's really a contribution of an additional $5 to $6 million towards affordable housing. And you could even argue there's a multiple on top of that because developers can build at a much lower cost than we could if they just gave us that money. So I think it's really, really important we don't lose sight of that. It's not $500,000, it's closer to $6.5 million in terms of the contribution to affordable housing. So with that, I'm happy to move it and we'll see where it goes.
Thank you. Next we have Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair Chapman. And I'd like to start by saying that I do believe that this is an underutilized corner and that we are in desperate need of more housing. So I'm in agreement with the principle of this building. I have a lot of concerns about the traffic there, both for cycling and for the added volume that it's going to bring to a very busy corner. Park Street and is not designed. I don't believe that, obviously not a traffic specialist, but the very narrow sidewalks, the amount of traffic that is already there, it is such a collector area for coming from the west side of the city now that I'm very concerned that it's going to turn into even more of a bottleneck, which than what it is right now. I would like to see more details and more information from the developer with regards to the traffic study, and perhaps our traffic people here on the 20th can talk to that as well. And until we receive some further information on that, I'm not prepared to support it this evening. And I'm hoping that they'll also include information as Councillor Chapman had suggested on Park Street coming from Glasgow. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Chapman. I'm going to put forward a motion of deferral, but before we open that up to that, the reason for why I'm looking for a deferral at this moment, because I really believe that this development is a good development. I just feel like that there could be some, I guess, a little more discussion between staff and the applicant, in particular dealing with the traffic study. I still want a little more time to go through the traffic study, and just getting it tonight doesn't give me much time to make a choice. Also, I don't disagree with Councillor Councillor Davies' recommendation. I feel the applicant has made some significant inroads with affordable housing, but I do agree. I really want to see quite a bit more 3-bedroom units within this development. And again, I'm hoping that this can be worked out in the week's time, or whatever that is, the 20th when we're meeting, week's time to negotiate something better. I feel like there's a few things that can be tweaked to make this better, and I outright don't want to decline this, not support this application. So this is the reason why I'm putting up a deferral.
Okay, do you want to just draft something and submit it to the clerk, or we can just call it a deferral vote?
Deferral.
Okay, just deferral. Thank you. Next, Councillor Snyder.
Thank you, Chair Chapman. I agree with a lot of what's been said tonight. Great development, but I share the concerns that Councillor Ioannidis, Councillor Johnson, and Councillor Chapman have said about traffic, the timing of the traffic study and the area of the traffic study. I do validate those concerns about the bottleneck and going to Belmont and that. And I'll support Councillor Ioannidis on the deferral. I just want to get more information on this. I think there's a lot of good to this project, but just a few details to iron out.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no other comments, I have a few, and then we'll go to the vote. So I have multiple concerns. First of all, the affordable housing component, and I know, yes, it sounds like a good deal. I just worry that in the investors market that we're currently living, to have affordable ownership housing that is not going to solve the needs of affordable housing. And I say that because a developer can come along, and I spoke to people at the region about this because I had concerns. A developer can come along, an investor can come along, anyone can come along, buy up all 50 units, and in a day flip them. There's nothing that holds them to be affordable. So I'd love to see those 50 units converted into rental units, affordable rental units, where there's a contract that's into perpetuity, or, I mean, it would have to be thought about and drafted. But I don't necessarily see that that's an option here. I have great concerns with traffic, as I've already mentioned, and as others have also talked about. I see the attempt at community space, given the size of this development and the number of units. And I think, a lot could be done. In fact, they could have a whole community center for the Victoria Park and Cherry Park neighborhood associations, who currently have no space they can call their own. It could be a deal, an arrangement, a partnership with the city, just as was done out in Williamsburg. And I don't know the details of that, but where the developer would have the whole main floor of one of the buildings would be community space that could be shared with the downtown, those two particular community neighborhood associations. I think it's excessive inside for the location, especially when we start thinking about transitions right beside a heritage district. And I see no attempt at having renewable energy sources. So I can't support it. I can certainly support a deferral if that would give other council members more time to think about it. I'm not adverse to that, but yeah, I think, we're a long way from what I would consider a development that would be appropriate. So Councillor Ioannidis, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, Chair Chapman, I would like a recorded vote, please.
Okay, on your motion or on the whole thing?
On my motion is fine.
Okay, and Councillor Davey, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm confused. The recorded vote would just be on the deferral, right? If there's anything else on the floor. Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to actually, I'm not sure you actually explicitly asked Chair Chapman, but you just raised a red flag for me too. I don't think any of us wants the situation you outlined of someone coming in and buying all the units or even some of the units and then flipping them at a profit. So I don't think staff might not be prepared to answer the question now, but when this comes back on the 20th, I would look to staff to possibly advise us of suggestions or ways that we can ensure that very possibility does not happen. And I'm sure there's a number of ways they could look at that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good suggestion. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, if you may or may not have noticed, I've had to disappear often tonight. I've been having technical problems, so I welcome a deferral because I haven't had as good of a chance to listen to everything tonight as I would. So by with the use of the deferral, will give me an opportunity to catch up. So I will support that. Thank you.
Okay. So I just would like some guidance from the clerk. So I will read the motion and then we'll go to vote on the deferral first. And then if that fails, we go to vote on the motion itself. Is that correct? I see Councillor Davies shaking his head. Okay, so the motion reads that official plan amendment application OPA 21011 VES for Innovation Developments Kitchener Limited, requesting to add site-specific policy area 6 to map 4, Urban Growth Center downtown of the official plan, and to add site-specific policy 15D269 to facilitate a mixed-use development having 1,124 residential units and 1,750 square meters of commercial space with a floor space ratio of 11.7 be adopted in the form shown in the official plan amendment attached to report DSD 2022-263 as attachment A, and accordingly forwarded to the Regional Municipality of Waterloo for approval, and that zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 21-017 VES for Innovation Developments Kitchener Limited be approved in the form shown in the proposed bylaw, and map number 1 is attached to report DSD 2022-263 as attachment B, and further that in accordance with Planning Action Section 45, 1.3 and 1.4, applications for minor variances shall be permitted for lands subject to zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 21-017 VES. So that's the staff report motion. And we will go first then to Councillor Ioannidis's deferral motion, and he asked for a recorded vote. So
when is the deferral to? Was there a date?
I think the 20th until the council meeting, is that correct? Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to do it in the order that I have people on my screen. We'll start off with Councillor Gazzola.
I'm in favor of the deferral.
Councillor Davey.
In favor.
Councillor Johnston.
In favor.
Councillor Ioannidis.
In favor.
Councillor Michaud.
In favor.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Schneider.
I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. So it will be deferred till October 20th. Thank you.
June.
Oh, June, what did I say? October? Well, October, we'll leave it till, no, sorry, till June 20th. Okay, so that's it for tonight. Thank you all for your engagement on this topic and for your patience as we got through it all. And